Looks like I am ready. All right, everybody, what's going on? We are live here on YouTube on the Brandon Bonanza channel for another lovely episode of the Brandon Bonanza Show. And we have a guest today I'm very excited about. But before we get into that, I do have I have a quote, but I have to stop this. Hey, everybody. And then I have to share that. All right, this is a good one. You guys are going to love this. Today's quote is by Buzz Aldrin. Mars is there waiting to be reached. Good old Buzz Aldrin. Yeah. So everybody, hi. What's going on? What's going on, chat? And welcome to my guest, Davin, who I've spoken to a few times, but never on the Brandon Bonanza. So welcome to the Brandon Bonanza show officially. What's going on, Davin?
Oh, doing pretty good. And I'm laughing at the intro quote. There are so many reasons why people could find that funny. And it was hitting me with like a bunch of those reasons all at the same time.
I'm glad it did. I wanted to find a quote about Mars, and that one came up, and I was like, you know what? That's hilarious because, and this is what I wanted to I was talking to you before the show, I wanted to bring up before we got going about our topic that we're going to be talking about Mars and retrograde and amongst other things. But I wanted to talk about good old Buzz Aldrin and NASA or whatever, and the spinning ball, or is it like a flat earth? Is it a firmament? You know, I tend to think it's a spiritual realm. But I think it is funny, though, because he's saying that Mars can be reached. So in a sense, what he's saying is correct. It's just not people's most perceptions. They think, oh, are we going to take a spaceship to Mars? And there's people that are, you know, like you or you and I that will say, oh, maybe this is more esoteric. Maybe this has things to do with that. But I said this last night, too, when I was talking to Scott from Rebunked about astrology. I was like, some people think there's heavenly bodies up there that affect us or whatever, all this stuff. I think it's just a reflection of consciousness of what's going on here somehow. And you could look at it, and because of what's going on, you can kind of see what's going on down here as far as people's consciousness goes. So that would apply for any model. So anybody could watch this. I just wanted to give that little nod so people didn't think we were like NASA fans or something.
Right. One of the biggest things making me laugh about it was like, did you ever see that clip where they had oh gosh, I'm forgetting all the names off the top of my head, but you know,
Neil Armstrong?
yes. And they're all sitting at a panel and the guy's asking them questions, and they just did what was supposed to be like one of the most amazing things that's ever been accomplished in the history of humanity, like ever, period. And they all look totally depressed and just worn out, and like they didn't want to be there. And it you're just like, did we really go there?
Yeah.
I don't know. So
yeah.
And then also, I'm 47 years old, and my entire life I've been hearing that, like, you know, really soon we're going to be on Mars, real soon. And I'm just like, God, I've been hearing this for 47 years now. We're not any close. In fact, we seem further now. We lost all the telemetry data. We have no idea how we went to the moon in the first place, but we're going to rebuild that technology. We're going to go back soon. And I'm just like, so we actually got further. We went from going there to, like, we lost all the data. We don't know where it went. And you know, and then there's, and then to see them sitting on that panel looking all depressed and like downtrodden, it was like, what? You just did like what was supposed to be the biggest accomplishment ever, and you're all depressed and like down about it. Like, what the heck is, you know? Just makes me laugh, you know.
If you ever really were a person who actually went to the moon, if that was possible, or who knows, I mean, it would be like, yeah, you would never have to, that you never have to worry about anything. You're never going to be broke. You know, like I think Lewis Black had a joke who's like, you never hear, you know, he went to the moon and now he's homeless. It's like, you know, you're fucking
almost set. Buzz Aldrin became an alcoholic. His life kind of took a little downslide.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm not. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it's not, but if he really did go to the moon, you think he would have became an alcoholic?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That was the point I was trying to get to. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, totally, dude. they would have been like on cloud nine in that interview, you know? I mean,
That's
I don't
that's
know.
what you would think, and that's what was so interesting when people redug that clip up and said, "Hey, does this make any sense to anyone?" And everybody just looking at it, just like, I don't know, doesn't something doesn't look right.
I think our country definitely went to the moon. It's just a turn of phrase. We went to the moon, like with
Yeah,
the, you know, with the
if it's a
dead
turn
and
of
all that.
phrase, then
Yeah.
perhaps I don't know. But yeah, whatever whatever it is, or this realm, or the explanation, I have no idea. That's
Yeah.
it's not what I do. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I like talking to people like you, because you don't let that piece of information be a barrier to whether you'll agree with somebody about things. You know, you're not like, oh my God, you're a flat earther, you're a
Yeah,
round
I have like
earther, you're
no hangups about
yeah,
that stuff. I'm actually open to
yeah.
all different type of things because I'm like, who knows?
I can't tell from where I am, you know, but I do like the
You're right.
compelling, like I think flat earthers make a good argument, but I think it's some kind of realm that we just don't understand. But you know, other than that, speaking of the realm, so Mars, tell me a little bit about Mars
Yeah, actually,
before we even get into the retrograde.
real quick before we get to Mars,
Oh yeah, yeah.
uh, I actually really like that description realm because uh, something that I was seeing was in these like what sometimes get called flat Earth type of descriptions. I saw a lot of really interesting questions being raised and some things being pointed out that were really like glaring contradictions and just things, outlying data was just like, wait, you can't ignore that. What's going on there? But it's the flat thing still didn't click either. But then also same thing with the conventional explanations, which is what those flat people were pointing out in the first place, is like, what about the things that don't fit what's going on here? So if you're leaning real heavily towards one or towards the other, I'm kind of starting to ask the question: have you lost the plot a bit? Because there's nothing telling us really solid in either way. So describing it as a realm takes us beyond those material constraints and beyond that, trying to pin it down in a material explanation, which I don't think we can ever get to. I don't think we have the knowledge or the ability. I think there's certain. I just don't think we have the ability to perceive certain things to reach a conclusion on some of those things. And so, if we're going to talk about realm, well, we're talking about, okay, it's a interplay between the material and the spiritual. There's a larger thing going on. So I I find that description pretty. It's a way that you can say a lot with just a few words. And also get past some of the hangups of some of the other types of perspectives where people are leaning really, really hard towards one type of perspective and they want to shut all the other discussions out. And it's like Rome kind of reopens it back up. Like, hey, let's ask all kinds of different questions without being totally committed, to a specific thing and trying to shut out the other perspectives. It kind of opens it back up. But anyhow, so
Yeah, 100%.
Mars in astrology. Uh,
Oh, let me say really quickly too. One piece of information I came across that's really crazy. So the flat earthers have a lot of great evidence and things they could show you, but also though, in your model, how can the sun reflect light up to the clouds as it's going away? You know, they say it doesn't set, it moves away, but it still will reflect light on the top of the clouds. So it's crazy, like so the model again, it's something that we just can't understand. I don't think we're on a spinning ball, but yeah, I do I just wanted to throw that out there because that's one of them that people could
yeah,
try to explain and get into stuff, but it's like, yeah, but if we're just a flat plane, the sun supposedly never goes down. If it's a flat, it's just going away, and we think it's an optical illusion. It looks like it sets. That's what they would say. And
yeah,
then I would say, well, then how does the sun shine onto the bottom of the clouds?
yeah. So, is it option A or is it option B? And then it's like, well, what about neither?
Yeah.
What about
Yeah,
what about
that's what,
neither?
it's not going to be easy to like the
It
truth.
has
I
to be
think,
A
yeah.
or it has to be B. And it's like, well, what about neither and both? Like, uh,
Yeah. It's like we're back to Coke and Pepsi or Democrats and Republicans. Yeah. Anywho, Mars.
yeah, Mars. So, Mars in astrology. So, what are some of the things the astrologers have ascribed to the planet Mars, or what is it associated with in astrology. So there's willpower, masculine energy. Sometimes in life it is necessary to have the ability to fight. And it is that willpower and that energy that you draw upon when you have to have the ability to fight. And also it is momentum and drive and push. So where it appears in the natal chart is often a place where you have a lot of forward pushing energy. Like you've got a lot of willpower there. You've got a lot of energy that you can harness to really push things forward. And some interesting descriptors I've heard other places for Mars. I've heard some astrologers describe it as the activator. Roland Legrand, who heads the Abelas School of Astrology, compares it to the accelerator in the car, the gas pedal. You know, you're stepping on the gas pedal to the metal. And then also Mars has been given rulership over Aries. Well, in like pre-modern astrology, traditional or classical astrology, pre-modern, Mars is the ruler of both Aries and Scorpio. But with Aries, we really get some interesting descriptions that kind of describe this. What is this archetype? What is this character that we're describing when we're talking about Mars? So Mars is the alpha warrior. It's the warrior spirit. There's that masculine energy, that willpower, that ability to put drive and momentum and push behind things. But also Aries represents some interesting things in astrology. It's the first house. It's the first stage of life. It's being born. It's emerging out into the world like, here I am. And this actually goes back to when the system was first laid out. So in Western tropical astrology is what I study and what I practice. In the Western tropical astrology, it was laid out at a time when Aries at 0 degrees was lined up with the spring equinox. And spring equinox is the beginning of the year in Western tropical astrology. And this helps get an understanding of both Aries and of Mars, Mars being the ruler of Aries, this business of the spring equinox. So in the ancient mythology, you had the life cycles of the sun and the death of the sun. And so the sun goes through a daily death and rebirth cycle. So, you know, rising in the morning, but then setting at night, and then we have nighttime, and then the next morning rises again. So that's a daily death and rebirth of the sun. But there's also a yearly death and rebirth of the sun, which plays out in a lot of mythological narratives. It's an archetype thing. It's like there's the sun as the hero. There's the sun as the solar hero king, or the sun as the sun king. So sometimes a king, sometimes a hero. You know, a lot of times these things are overlapped. It's like both, or even the hunter king sometimes in some of the mythologies. But this hunter king goes off on a journey, and then has to go into the underworld and does battle, and then reemerges victorious, dies in the underworld, but then is born again and reemerges victorious. So what is going on there? This is actually telling a story about the seasons. Because if you were to go outside where you live and you were to stay in the same place and do observations every day, and just, you know, you set up little sticks or a little sundial, or just set up, even just using really primitive tools, you could do this. Just set up some kind of markers where you're looking at the horizon and you look at where does the sun come up on the horizon, and you mark the spot. What you're going to observe is that every day as the year progresses towards the winter, the sun appears to be setting further and further southward. So this place where you're marking the place where it's setting is actually shifting. Actually, the rising and the setting points both. But anyhow, it's shifting. It's going further southward. As it's going further southward, the days are also getting shorter, and the sun is decreasing in power, and the weather is getting colder, and the winter's coming on, and eventually the trees drop their leaves, and then you have the snow and the you know, everything goes through this sort of death of the winter. And it keeps going southward all the way until you get to the winter solstice, which, you know, precession of the equinoxes, these dates will shift slightly, but what happens is the rising and setting point is the same for 3 days in a row when you hit the solstices, both the summer and the winter solstice. It'll rise and set, and it'll stop like shifting positions. It'll just rise and set in the exact same position 3 days in a row. So at the winter solstice, which is right around Christmas time, 21st to the 23rd or 22nd, you know, depending on where things have shifted to the precession of the equinoxes. But anyhow, 3 days in a row, the sun rises and sets at the exact same position in the middle of this death of the winter. And anything in the ancient world that stopped moving for 3 days was dead. If something's laying on the ground and it just hasn't moved in three, oh, the thing's dead. So there was this symbolism of the death of the sun, that the sun had died at that winter solstice. Now, after those 3 days of rising and setting in the same place, the sun then budges and moves northward the next day, which is the 24th, December 24th, or December 25th, depending on where it falls in the, where we're at with the precession of the equinoxes, how the dates have shifted. But anyhow, after that, those 3 days of rising, setting at the same point, it moves northward, and it starts moving northward every day, and the days start getting longer, and the sun starts increasing in power, and the days are getting warmer, and the earth starts to return to a state of fertility. The flowers are pollinating, and the trees are putting out the leaves, and all the plants are pollinating and flowering, and the animals return to high activity. Rabbits get really horny in the springtime. Suddenly, we've got rabbits everywhere jumping around, and everything comes back to life in the springtime. So this springtime, Aries is at the beginning, and this is a great thrusting forward of energy, that life energy, the energy that causes the seed of a tree as it's growing to turn into a sprout, but then have to push up through all the rocks in the soil to actually emerge above the soil. This is that forward thrusting energy of the springtime, and this was celebrated in the ancient world as the beginning of the year and the return of life. Life has come back, and the sun has come back. The sun conquered the death that it went to at that solstice. That was the underworld. That was, Hades. It went into the underworld and did battle with the world of the dead, and it actually died there, but then was reborn, reemerged victorious, and then everything comes back to life in the springtime. And Aries in the ancient world was at the beginning of that, or when the Western tropical astrological system was laid out. Aries was at 0 degrees at the spring equinox. Because of precession of the equinoxes, the constellations and the signs and the seasons no longer line up the way that they did in the past. But anyhow, Western tropical astrology is all about the seasons. So the movement and the rhythm of the seasons is still the focus there. And springtime is always Aries, no matter what, no matter which constellation we have in position in the sky. Springtime is always Aries, which is ruled by Mars. Fall equinox is always Libra. That's the tipping of the scales. That's the tipping point of the seasons, the shift from one seasonal energy to another. Winter solstice is always Capricorn. Summer solstice is always Cancer, and so on and so forth. So when you hear Western tropical astrologers talking about signs, they're actually not talking about constellations. They're talking about seasons. They're talking about where we're at in the seasonal shift of the year. But anyhow, Aries being ruled by Mars, so both Mars and Aries, they occupy a really important place in this story, because that spring equinox, that return of life in the springtime, and also the symbolism of the ram. If you watch the way that rams behave, they got their ram's horns and they butt heads with each other. Get out of my way, I got to go climb the mountain. So what is the mission of the sign of Aries, and also the house that Aries represents? It is establishing the identity. So it's at the beginning of everything. It's like the ultimate cardinal sign. It's at the beginning of the entire zodiac, the beginning of everything in Western tropical astrology. Emerging out into the world, you're being born, here I am. But also that ram with the ram's horns, button heads, get out of my way because I got to go climb the mountain. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. There's a positive expression of this, getting in touch with who you are, getting in touch with your identity, and finding your path to go up and climb that mountain. And also having the ability to tap into some of that willpower that Mars represents, and to defend your boundaries and defend where you stand. Here's where I stand, here's where I am, and this is who I am. So these are some of the things that both Mars and Aries are associated with in the Western tropical astrology.
Well, I like that. That was really, really thorough. And I like the explanation, because we all know what happens around December 24th and 25th, everybody, right?
Winter solstice.
Yeah, that. Well, what else though? Yeah. It's all that music they play. They already started playing it. I was in the store the other day and they were playing Christmas music.
Oh, I love it. It's the most wonderful time of the year. I grew up in Michigan, and we have a good solid winter in Michigan. And so not only do you get the music and all the consumerist bullshit that goes along with it, but you also get the real actual seasonal energy coming in, with the pine trees are the only ones that stayed green, and the snow everywhere. And it truly is the most wonderful time of the year. If you grew up in a northern climate, I really love it.
Oh yeah. I live in Connecticut, so we get 4 really good seasons. So I get excited too. It's nice. I was out hiking actually Monday on the full moon, and it was almost 80 degrees Monday and humid, right? And then the next day the high was like 55 and it was like chilly and windy. So in the middle of that night, it stayed, I could feel the humidity, and then the wind started blowing in. It was like the winter, and I'm like, wow, this is like the first assault of winter. And then it just got chillier and chillier and chillier. It was
Yeah,
crazy.
there will be that first cold chill that comes in where you're like, oh, now it's getting serious.
Yeah.
Winter is actually going to come around, I guess, huh?
Yeah, exactly. That just happened. And so what I wanted here to do now to add to what you said about astrology, I'm just going to show a card that embodies a lot of Aries and Martian energy. This is the Emperor in the Rider-Waite tarot deck. And from what you were saying, it really reminds me of like Lord of the Rings when King Theoden wakes up from his sleep, under worm tongue, and then he gets into action. Like this is the moment I think this card embodies it, when he wakes up, because what you said about Aries in the springtime, it's really, really nice because spring starts off cold and then it gets warm. So it's like the will coming through. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, what a lot of this card represents. Also, it's card number 4, which April's the 4th month. There's like a lot of synchronicities with that. A lot of Martian symbolism on this. You got the ram's heads, you got the mountains in the red sky, so it actually looks like he's on Mars. Oh gee,
and cardinal fire, so the orange, yellow, and red. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, and then he's got the armor on his feet, which I like also, because that
Alpha warrior.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a little bit of water down near his feet too, little stream coming through. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great card. So I just wanted to show that a little bit. So this also, everybody, that also goes along. That would be the tarot's response to Mars or whatever. So
Yeah,
just wanted to show
absolutely.
that.
The tarot and astrology go hand in hand. There's so much written into it that you can use it as a tool to learn. Each of these art forms you can use as a tool to learn the other one. There's so much going on there. A lot of stuff going on with the quadruplicity and triplicity as well. It's all laid out. And also, oh, this was interesting. All of the what do you call it? Oh gosh, I've been working too much. I'm losing words and phrases off the top of my head. Anyhow, it's laid out in the tarot.
Yeah, totally. And I want to give a quick shout out to the chat. What's going on, Chris, aka Quiet Sparky Bear? He lives in Connecticut, and we've hung out a few times, and we're gonna go hiking soon, right, Chris? Shout out to G Lararo, however you say that. I'm a snow monkey, he said. I said, me too. We all love the snow. Joe K says, first time listening, good gravy. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's going to get even better. We're just getting started, everybody. We are just getting started. All right. So when did Mars go into retrograde? Wasn't it this weekend, last weekend?
I got some notes here.
Perfect.
October 30th.
So Sunday, or last Sunday.
And it's going to go until January 2023.
Interesting.
So it's a good long one.
Yeah. So
yeah, November, December, and then about half of January. So about good, little more than 2.5 months. Well, that's already the end of October, but anyhow, yeah, about 2.5 months, a little less.
Yeah. So a lot of people, I think, are familiar when they hear retrograde. They always think of Mercury retrograde. That's like the pop culture famous one that everybody knows about, And I guess I was kind of guilty of that myself too, because when I heard that this was happening and I listened to some stuff about it, it was really interesting. And that's when I asked you about it in our group chat. And then you responded so amazingly with all that information that I was like, let's record. So where do you think you're going to start with the retrograde stuff?
Actually, let's start here real quick. So
yeah, go ahead. You got notes. So
one of the reasons why you always hear about Mercury retrograde all the time is because Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year, or the way that it lines up, sometimes it can be 4 times in a year. Like we just had a year when it was, or are we in it now? I forget. Yeah, when it's 4 times instead of 3. So
Wow.
usually 3, but it can be 3 to 4 times a year. And there are these websites in the olden days. It used to be newspapers and magazines, and now everything's digital, so it's websites. But same thing, you got these news websites and fashion websites and popular reading website, and clickbait and headlines. Mercury retrograde, and everybody goes nuts. Oh my God, it's a Mercury retrograde. And I'm like, yeah, it does it all the time. That's what the planets do. They do this all the time. Like you're almost always in some kind of retrograde, but you don't freak out every single day of the year. So like, but anyhow, so they like to get clickbait and headlines to for people to freak out. Actually, can I share this screen? How do I do this?
Yeah, let me just give you a permission to do that. I think it's here. Who can share? Oh yeah, I already have it. Oh, I think I kept it set like that forever. Yeah, okay, go ahead. You're good.
Oh, here
Shout
we go.
out to Caribe really quick and Zeralath. They are both in Connecticut. So Mercury is the herald of all witty trickster gods. And then Caribe says hello.
Oh, wait. How do I unshare the screen?
Near the
Top.
near anywhere on the picture you're sharing, it'll have like instructions coming over it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably the top.
Oh, here it is. So I gotta find it first and then I'll share it. But anyhow, now I lost my train of thought. I confused myself. What was I talking about? Oh, I was talking about Mercury retrograde. They make a big deal, but there's actually a bunch of them every year.
Yeah.
So I have something about the retrogrades, if I can find it. Here
It's
we
funny
go.
you brought up the mainstream because it's so I was thinking the same thing where it's like we know who owns the newspapers and the and the magazines, the same kind of people in the mainstream influence. So they use it to kind of go along with the slave conditioning or whatever, you know what I mean? In a way, like when people like you and I look at it, we're looking at it to like empower ourselves or learn about ourselves and our surroundings.
Yeah.
Professor Davin, thank you. That's what Caribe says. Awesome learning some new stuff about Mars and the sun and other gravy. Indeed.
Oh my God, I'm making all kinds of trouble for myself here. I'm clicking things, there's screens disappearing, there's all kinds of goofy stuff going on. I don't know what I did.
That's all right. It's cool. It's live, man. So people are very forgiving when we're live. So I also can say I could do a quick
Here we
commercial.
go. Oh my gosh. You click one thing and it takes like 12 clicks to return the screen to the way it was. So anyhow, I found this thing that I wanted to share and it's about retrogrades. And I wasn't expecting to talk about this, so I didn't set it up. I have a little folder where I put some images that I might try to share later, but I didn't put it there because this is just something that popped up like, oh, I got a really good one and I wasn't expecting that to come up. So I'm going to try it again. Sharing the screen to see if I can share.
Blood moon.
Here it is. Okay.
This show is brought to you by Paraplegia Coffee. Make sure you go get some Paraplegia Coffee. I should probably text them and tell them I'm live. Tell them to come in here.
Oh, it's finally loaded, I think. All right. Can you see the image that I shared? Did it work?
I see a picture of all your images, like all thumbnails.
Oh, it doesn't show the one.
Nope, you might have to unshare and share again. Because it probably opened a different window when you open that.
All right. So I guess we'll do it this way.
Aha, there we go.
So I guess I have to open it first and then share it. You can't just go through and select anyhow. This is what I was trying to share. And hopefully the text isn't too small or too hard to read, but I'll just read it anyhow. So different periods of retrograde motion. So like I was saying, all the planets have retrogrades. That's what they do. Mercury 3 times a year. And this is about 19% of the time that you have Mercury retrograde during, average length, just during the year. Venus, every 18 months, Venus will go retrograde. And that's only 7% of the time. And Venus actually has the closest that any planet has to a circular orbit, to like a perfect circle. None of them are a perfect circle, but Venus is the closest, which is interesting because Venus is harmony and balance. So that it would have the closest to like a harmonic principle. If you're thinking of like, like in sound healing, that topic of like, what do they call that? There's like frequency and there's, I don't know what the term is I'm looking for, where you look at the vibration and the frequency of certain tones.
Oh, cymatics.
And like in terms of cymatics, this is like the most symmetric is Venus, which is interesting because Venus represents harmony and balance. But anyhow, Mars will go retrograde about every 26 months. So a little more than 2 years, a little more than every 2 years, Mars goes retrograde. Jupiter, every 13 months, it will go retrograde. Saturn, every 12 and a half months. And Uranus, about every 12 months. Neptune, about every 12. And Pluto actually spends the most time in retrograde out of any planet. Pluto is in retrograde 43% of the time of the year.
Wow.
So a lot of hype about Mercury retrogrades, but Mercury is nothing compared to Pluto. Pluto is like retrograde almost half the year. And some of these other outer planets as well, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they're like retrograde almost half the year. That's normal for them to be doing that. That's what they do. And interesting thing with Chiron is stationary about 5% of the year and goes retrograde about 40% of the time during a year. And then the other times in motion. It has a really weird erratic orbit. So anyhow, when we're talking about retrogrades, interesting, all the hype is about Mercury because Mercury does it 3 times a year. Also, Mercury has a lot of, is said to in astrology, have a lot of personal influence in its mind, intellect, and communication. So it's like you maybe pick up on it easily when it happens with Mercury. But I think it's a lot of clickbait and headlines for these popular reading magazines and newspapers. It's been a trend that's been going on for forever. Is using it as clickbait. Oh my God, Mercury retrograde. I'm like, yeah, all the planets go retrograde, and some of them do it way more than Mercury does, or for way longer. But anyhow, that was a fun little anecdote about retrogrades. Different planets going retrograde. So Pluto's king of the retrogrades.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, especially when you think about what Pluto represents.
Yeah. Transformation.
Yeah. This realm is it goes to the whole thing where like everything's always changing, growing, evolving, or whatever, It really shows in the luminaries. You could see that, especially with Pluto. That's crazy. I didn't know that. Thank you for that.
I'm actually working on a project now. I just finished Neptune in the signs, and I've been working on Pluto in the signs, and I've been working on this for weeks. And it is so hard pulling everything together. This is like the last 2 that I've done. So Neptune, and now I'm working on Pluto. But both of these, I felt like I just bit off a bigger bite than I could chew. And so I've just been really working on it. And it seems like the harder I work at it, the more stuff I uncover about, now I need to do this also, and I got to take care of that, and I haven't done this yet for I'm just like, is this video ever going to end? Am I ever going to finish this thing? But I am finally making some progress.
Oh, that's awesome.
But one of the things that makes it difficult is Neptune and Pluto. You're both of these cases, we're talking about planets that are very, very slow moving. And so we're not talking about individual influence in your personal life. We're talking about collective societal influence. And so that's, makes the subject really broad, and it takes it out into topics where there's just so much going on. You're talking about history and you're talking about society, and big trends that you see in society. And so it's just really hard to take some of these ideas and download them into a digestible form in an astrology discussion, and also hitting all the signs going through it. It's just, so anyhow, but working on that.
Sounds like a masterpiece. It reminds me of like Michael Tessarion's Path of the Fool kind of thing, you know, where he just covered everything about the cards.
Yeah, and like each card, there's like a 15-hour broadcast where he doesn't even take a bathroom break or get something to drink. He just talks for 15 hours about like one card.
Yeah.
Like he just unpacks and just keeps going and going. Yeah, he did some incredible stuff with the tarot in that series. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and this kind of reminds me of that, but in the mind of astrology, and it's stuff that people don't really talk about that much. Some people do, but
So the Neptune one is finished. Go check out my Neptune in the signs. That one's done. Pluto is coming up soon. I think I'm getting around to
awesome.
the point. So should we talk about the Mars retrograde?
Yeah. I'm just going to drop a link to your channel in the chat while you do that. So never mind me. I'm listening.
Okay. And I'm not still sharing my screen, am I? I took that down already, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay, we're good. Okay, so Mars went retrograde in Gemini starting around October 30th. And this is going to go through until the end of December. But with these retrogrades, there's also what they call like a shadow period, or I don't want to get all technical about it, but so some of this is going to be carrying through into January of 2023. But anyhow, interesting thing going on here. So like we talked about in the beginning, we're talking about Mars, and we're talking about that it represents a lot of forward pushing energy. There's momentum, there's drive, and there's push that Mars brings to things. Mars is the activator. Things get activated with the influence of Mars. So Mars going into Gemini, what does Gemini represent? Gemini is ruled over by Mercury, and Gemini is the mind, intellect, and communication. And Gemini is also associated with the stage of childhood, like when curiosity and learning about the world around you is really kicked up into high gear. It's like that age when you first start going to elementary school. So you're starting to meet other people, you know, your age, and you're learning how to interact with them. And then you're also interacting with adults, and they're teaching you how to read and write, mind, intellect, communication. You might even be called upon to like speak in front of the class. So now you might even have to speak in public for the first time in your life, or just, you know, speaking around other people your age and also speaking to adults. So there's a lot of mental activity going on, but also curiosity. You want to learn about the world around you. Your curiosity, you know, it's that childlike inquisitiveness, that youthful spirit, the way that children have that like real innocent, just they like to ask why. Well, why does that work that way? How come? Why? You know, that wanting to know. And so Gemini is on an axis of understanding, which runs from Gemini to Sagittarius. And these are like two sides of a spectrum. And Gemini is on the side of like curiosity, a childlike curiosity, wanting to learn, wanting to know more, not getting too deep and heavy with any one particular thing, but wanting to go out and sample a little bit of everything. It's kind of like when you go to the buffet, you want to try a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You want to Gemini energy, you want to try a little bit of everything. So Mars and Gemini, we're talking about activation of mind, intellect, and communication. Retrograde, interesting thing with retrograde is that prefix at the beginning, the letters RE, and the words that begin with that prefix. So, you know, you've got retrograde, but you've also got review, rethink, reimagine, you know, all these rewords. It's like rewind, you know, taking a step back. It's or that, you know, that,
Retard.
what is it?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Retard.
Or that,
Retard.
yeah, that Beatles song, "Get Back to Where You Once Belonged." You know, get back to where you're shopping at the thrift store. You know, going to pick up some vintage clothes, or maybe you're going to buy some old vinyl records, or where, you know, it's like, so going back. It's review. It's retrograde. It's review. It's reprocess, rethink, reevaluate. Interesting observation made by the astrologer Colin Bedell, and this is new to me. I don't know too much about this person. He wrote an interesting article that I liked. I was looking at Astrodienst. I go there all the time, just, you know, reading articles or looking at the ephemeris, doing different things. But so this is my first time coming across this name, but he did write an interesting article, and he had this really interesting quote from another person who I don't know. So, you know, but anyhow, it's a great quote. name is Ruth Babermeyer. And she said, words are windows or they are walls. They could be both. Words could be windows or they could be walls. Depends on how how you utilize it. Depends on what's going on, where you're at in your life, or where other people are at, what's happening in that world of communication in your life. Words could be windows or they could be walls. And so excellent for time that we've been living in over the last few years and where we've been at in that world of mind, intellect, and communication. What we've been seeing in the media, in the news, what we've been seeing in society, what we've been seeing in our relationships as well. All these big transformations that have been coming through in the world, and then it's impacting our relationships and our ability to communicate with each other, in a really profound way. So I thought that was an excellent quote. Words are windows or they are walls. And, how do we get to that place where we make sure that they're windows and that they're not walls? Because they could be used that way, where they become barriers, where they become, then there's also
It's so fun to use them as walls, though. That's the hard part, because it's like, especially when you have an intellect, you just think, I'll get them, but you don't realize you're causing more division.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then takes me around to another interesting concept, which is I think this is a professor at Harvard. I don't know much about this person either, but Dr. Harville Hendricks. And he made the observation that most of us are trained to speak in parallel monologues. So monologues are when one person's speaking at, one person's speaking at a time, but monologues that are running in parallel. And one of the big things I think we're looking at with, let's go back to Mars and Gemini, and that we're going through a retrograde real quick. So we're going through a review process, all of these words, reevaluate, reassess, review, rewind. And it's taking place in that world of mind, intellect, and communication. But another interesting observation of it's Gemini, which is symbolized by the twins. And the twins, these are two people. These are people who are, they're in that world of mind, intellect, and communication. They are communicating with each other. They are dialoguing. They're even arguing and opposing each other sometimes. And then they are reconfiguring, rejoining, and coming back together again. So this thing that we go through in our relationships. And I think relationships are very foundational in a healthy life path. If you're not taking care of what's happening in your relationships, then you're going to be having trouble in your life overall. That's how important relationships are. So really interesting to have this occurring in the sign of Gemini, where you've got the twins, you've got two people interacting, dialoguing with each other, communicating, also arguing and butting heads, separating, coming back and joining back together again. And Mars is like review and reprocessing and rethinking where we're at with a lot of these things. And this business about parallel monologues, I found that an interesting way to describe it, because I've made this observation before. One of my cousins used to joke about this. He used to ask people, like, were you actually listening to that person, or were you just waiting them to finish so that you could jump back in and assert your words over the top of theirs? And I think this is part of what we're looking at with this retrograde. Mars and retrograde energy is rewinding and taking a step back and being like, are we really communicating, or are we just talking, are we talking parallel? Like one person's talking this way, the other person's talking that way. And it looks like they're communicating with each other, but they're not. They're just talking past each other or over each other. And they're not actually coming to that place of listening, re-engaging, reevaluating what the other person is actually saying. And, is it talk or is it actual communication?
Sounds like you're describing some podcasts that are out there. Ooh. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. The way I've heard it described is, are you just waiting for your turn to talk? And that's something that I heard, and it like stuck with me. And I was like, man, I got to start paying attention more and not worrying about what I'm going to say. And it's helped in the whole podcast thing too. Like I like to just let people free form and fly off and go. That's why we do Oversharing. It's the same kind of concept. Once in a while, I like to chime in with my retard jokes, but usually I just let the guests go. Yeah, that's something
balance, letting them run their script, and then joining back in with some stuff to add. But anyhow, continue.
No, yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It makes it really good for interviewing people, I think, because you really let them go. But anywho, when I heard that, it kind of blew my mind. And I've even talked about not taking things personally and how you can work on that. And one way is to just realize that a lot of people they have a movie playing out in their head basically, and they're the main character. So if you could go inside the theater, sit next to them and watch them view this movie of their life, you're going to realize that they don't know the real you. They just have an idea of a character who you are in their head. It's because nobody will ever truly know the real you. And then if you take it even further, you realize that most people are just having a conversation with themselves in front of you.
Right. That's exactly what he's talking about when he's saying parallel monologues. They're each having a conversation with themselves just in front of another person. They're not really actually communicating with each other.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's
It
why I
sounded
like
so
to
much
use
funnier the way
humor.
you said it. I like that.
Oh, thank you, thank you. That's why I like to use humor, especially in regular. I'm a wedding DJ. I talk about this a lot, but when I'm dealing with like maitre d's and photographers and all this stuff, I try to make it like a real thing. Not like this, oh, hi, how you doing? I'm like, oh, and I'll just like be silly or bring up something that I'm not supposed to say, but not in like a bad way, but just something silly, and it makes people laugh, and it really gets them in the moment. So yeah, I'm glad that you I love that parallel, would you call it parallel monologuing?
Yeah, that was what the one guy described it as, parallel
Yeah, my ears
monologues.
perked up when you said that. I was
And
like,
then
what?
or saying it in my cousin's language, are you actually listening, or are you just waiting for your turn to talk so you can go over the top of them? Or the way you said it was, I thought the funniest one, two people having a conversation with themselves but just in front of each other, like not really communicating.
Yeah, and I got that. Just for everybody knows, there's a book called The Fifth Agreement and the Four Agreements, and it's by Don Miguel Ruiz. And I listened to the audiobooks years ago, and that's one thing he said. Like, he said that whole thing, and he talked about not taking things personally, and it like broke my whole mind apart when he said that. I was like, that is so true. I'm like, oh my God.
Such a good point, and really interesting, because what preceded this Mars retrograde and then what happened after the Mars retrograde. So basically, what set the stage in the background of this? Oh, I'm talking in terms of astrology. Astrologically, what like kind of set the stage just before this Mars retrograde, and then also came in at the beginning of it. So back in bit earlier in October, I mean, it's late October, but earlier than now, we had that Scorpio new moon. And then just recently we had a full moon in Taurus. But when you have a full moon, that's a sun and moon opposition. So you got sun and moon in opposite. So the sun was in Scorpio and the moon was in Taurus. So we had a new moon in Scorpio. That was sun and moon both in Scorpio. Then we had a full moon in Taurus, which was sun in Scorpio, moon in Taurus. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because Scorpio, and you brought up not taking things personal. And this is totally the domain of Scorpio. That is that area where we're talking about deep emotional waters. When we're talking about Scorpio, we're talking about things that are deeply intimate and personal. And so I think that is another thing that kind of set the stage before this retrograde. So what else is it about it in this process of reevaluation that we're going through in our communication, in our relationships? Well, you totally nailed it, because in the astrology, what was setting the stage was some deep personal issues going on with Scorpio, and a lot of it is revolving around intimacy, the domain of intimacy. Also, just recently we had, I don't know if I want to get too much into this. Might be fun if we get into it, we'll get into it. But we could do more with the full moon, which was last night. That was a full moon in Taurus, and like I was saying, that was moon in Taurus, but that was sun over in Scorpio. But there was a whole lot of stuff going on in the astrological charts. Interesting, because it was also a blood moon, and it was also a lunar eclipse, and it was election day. How many things do you need to pile up on top of the thing before, like?
Yeah, I was talking about
There's
that
so much going
on
on
the show
there.
last night. Yeah.
But yeah, that was amazing that you brought up taking things personal, or getting past taking things personal, how important that is in those areas that we were just discussing. This area of relationships, our communication with people, communication being the foundation of relationships, and relationships being the foundation of, basically having a healthy life. I'm not talking about romantic relationships, by the way, all types of relationships, yeah, romantic relationships are included in that, but all different types of relationships, human beings, we are social creatures. Relationships are everything to us. So, to take care of the health of relationships is, a big part of how you take care of your health overall. And a big, huge part of what keeps relationships healthy and keeps them working the right way is communication. And so I think this, these astrological events we're looking at, this is my interpretation. And you don't necessarily need to believe in astrology. You could also take it as self-reflection tool. Does it give you interesting things to think about and evaluate what's going on in your life? You could take it that way as well. Looks like some themes having to do with communication and taking care of our relationships are what's being highlighted here. But yeah, learning how to not take things personal, playing a big important role in that as well. And just interesting the way that the astrology kind of set the stage for some of that. And I didn't discuss that with Brandon ahead of time, so he just kind of he hit the bullseye. I didn't set him up to hit the bullseye. He did it on his own.
Synchronicities abound, I tell you what. And one thing I do want to add really quickly is when you can learn to overcome these aspects of your personality, you could say it's even an aspect in astrology of yourself. When you learn how to overcome and use it as a tool. So when you learn how to not take things personally, you can then use like in my example, I have a quick wit. So like if somebody pissed me off or whatever, I could just say something or, be mean or whatever. But now I don't take it personally. So I can use that energy for something else. It's in that brain processing, I could use in a different way. So now it makes me like upgraded, so that's why going back to what I said about all the mainstream stuff, they don't tell you all that stuff. They'll just tell you like what's wrong with you.
Right,
they don't tell you could fix all that stuff, and then it's a superpower.
Yeah, because if they give you the fix, you wouldn't need to come back, and then they don't have a dependent consumer.
Bingo.
If they can keep you in that cycle of well, how do I get past the next problem and the next one and the next one? Now you've got a dependent consumer coming back again and again. But if they said, hey, you need to take a step back and disengage from this process altogether, well, now you're getting on the path to freedom, and part of that is going to be not taking things personal, which is part of viewing yourself objectively and not being caught up in the that conflict ego world, being able to step away and step back from that, see yourself from a higher perspective. I have an interesting thing that I was thinking about that I thought related to some of this. There was a book I read years ago, and name of the author is William Glasser, and he wrote a book called Choice Theory, which is a really weird title. And I read the book twice, and I still think the title is really weird. I don't quite know why he called it that still, but I thought the book was awesome. But anyhow, he was a psychologist or therapist or I don't know what it was. All those terms sound the same to me. I get them all confused. Psychologist, psychotherapist, whatever he was. He was a shrink or something. So he worked with, he did a lot of work with married couples, who were having relationship problems in their marriage, counseling married couples, did a lot of counseling for individuals as well. But he also worked in like hospitals and prisons, working with people there. And he also did work in schools. And this was how I came across it, because there was a time when I used to be a school teacher, and there was a program where they were discussing some of his ideas, and then I went and I read the book, and the book was awesome. But anyhow, so some interesting observations that he made. So one of them is this concept that he described where he was talking about something that he calls a quality world. And he said that when you engage with people, or it might not necessarily be people, certain things that you engage with in life. Maybe it's the first time that you played sports when you were a kid, or maybe it was the first time that an uncle or a grandfather or something started giving you really good advice, and you felt like you were really learning something, or places in life where you felt like you were learning, where you were expanding, where you were having some really positive growth. you will take those experiences and put them into what he calls your quality world. And then other things that line up with that quality world are things that you really respond to. And he made a observation that when he was working in schools that were struggling and schools that were failing and low engagement from the students and all kinds of problems, and he would do surveys with the students and also schools that were performing well also. But anyhow, he did these surveys and he said, in what classes are you putting forth your most effort? Are you really putting like you really are doing your best? Like not just like you're trying to get the grade, but you're actually like putting out your best work. And it was like across the board, all of the core subjects came back with super low scores. Nobody gave a shit about history or math or science or none of it. Nobody like, and it was all like sports, drama, acting, poetry class, yearbook, all the extracurricular stuff. They're like, that's where, gym class, that's where I'm putting in my full 100% effort. That's where I feel alive. And that's where I'm really giving up my all. And he's like, that's because this is part of their quality world and that other stuff is not. So how do we bridge that gap? If there are other things that we think are important for them to be learning in those other areas, well, we got to somehow make that connect with their quality world, or else this is human nature. You're not going to want to have nothing to do with it if it's not actually going to become part of your quality world. But another observation from this book, which is actually why I'm bringing it up, because we're talking about reevaluating where we're at in our relationships and also communication. We're talking about this retrograde, having us reprocess and reevaluate and review what's happening in that world of communication and relationships in our lives. When he was working with married couples, he said that he observed that some people have a really strong need for control and some people have a really strong need for freedom. And basically all of us have both of these needs, different, you might lean a little more heavily towards one side or towards the other for some of us, but for some people who have a really strong orientation towards one side or towards the other, you put two people into a relationship, one who has a really strong need for control and the other one has a really strong need for freedom. What are the chances that that marriage was made to last, or that relationship is, like you gotta have the right balance of these things. He went into some other dynamics with relationships as well. But he said, even when you have strong orientation towards, these two like polar opposite sides of the spectrum, that doesn't mean it's destined to fail or that it can't work, but it's just going to take some more effort. It's going to take some more work getting there. But some of the things that he did is, he had people sit down and go through exercises where they had to listen to the other person, not talk in parallel past them, but they had to actually listen. So, there's some classic techniques for this. Things like you have to restate what the person said in your own words, which causes you to, or kind of forces you to like actually think about what they really said. Because, you get, wait, how did they say that? What was the words? You got to actually really process it and some other things. And he had some really funny anecdotes, like, some really difficult people, like this one guy who he could just never get him to actually stop and listen. The guy was just constantly running his mouth over everybody else in the room. And he had to come up with some really clever tactics to kind of like force this guy to like sit down and shut up and listen for once. And like, and then suddenly the doors open up again. And suddenly, things aren't as horrible as they were before because the guy finally learned how to listen. But anyhow, excellent book that I recommend if you are going through some of those processes in your life where you're like, what's going on in that world of relationships and communication? And I strongly recommend that book. I thought it was excellent. And I think it fits the theme we're talking about today. And I wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, I like that. That really reminds me of my experience in high school, to bring some comedy in here, because Jim, I love Jim. Shout out to Mr. Beeler. He's dead now, but that guy would have a beer on his desk at 9 a.m. and not even trying to hide it. Like he had a little office, but if you were back there, and he allegedly punched some students before. So yeah, dude, gym class was great. The early 90s were crazy.
How times have changed.
Yeah. Right.
The stuff they were getting away with back then. I remember I'm old enough that I remember a time where there was like a smoking lounge for students in the high school that I went to. Not at the time I was going to that high school, but I was like in elementary school and I used to hear stories about it. And eventually by the time I was old enough to go to that high school, they actually got smart enough to be like, what, is smoking cigarettes bad for you? And then they got rid of the smoking lounge for students but teachers used to smoke in the classroom.
They had a smoking area in my school, and then Then they got like hardcore against it while I was there. But yeah, there was like a smoking area right, and there was like a little courtyard in the middle, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
And then there'd be some teachers who didn't even bother to go to the smoking area. They would sit there right in the classroom and just smoke. So everybody else has to breathe it all in secondhand, you know? Nobody gave a shit back then. It was like, just, breathe it in, just deal with it.
Oh yeah, I remember
What are you
that stuff.
complaining about?
Yeah, I remember being at my friend's house and they'd have the heat on with the windows closed, and his mom and dad are both chain smoking, like the whole time.
Yeah. And you can see like a layer of smoke up, like, just beneath the ceiling. There was just a layer just kind of hanging there.
Yeah, that's why I always hung out on the floor.
Right?
I'll just lay on the floor, guys.
Yeah.
But I digress. Well, I smoke tobacco now, but I get like organic leaves that I cut up. But yeah, I never did really smoke a lot of cigarettes at all.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan, but this is like totally different. I mean, it's just wait, hits you have a pipe also that I'm really excited about.
Oh, yeah. The pipes are different because they smell so awesome.
Yeah, totally. Totally. All right. But anywho, I just want to tell my gym story because that made me laugh, but I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, you didn't interrupt at all. That was actually the main points I wanted to hit upon for the Mars retrograde and the big themes that I was looking at, just looking at some of the astrology, some of the charts that preceded it, but then also just looking at the thing itself. And so I got to discuss the main points I wanted to hit on that topic.
Sweet. So what do you think this all has to do with like election day? Isn't that, we have the full moon. Mars is retrograde a week before it.
Yeah.
It's crazy how it lines up because if it was 26 months ago, that would put us in 2020, like in the summer of 2020,
I want to
when
see if I could
things started to open up again.
find the chart real quick. I've got the chart of the full moon here. All right, anyhow, I found the file and I opened it up just in case I wanted to share it later. Yeah, so it was interesting. So all of this talk about a red wave, and then we have a blood moon and lunar eclipse on election day, all piling up on election day. Yeah, and Mars retrograde, Mars the red planet. I don't know.
Did we have a red wave though? I think that people said we didn't have as much. I don't know. I only heard Owen Benjamin say something about it. I don't pay attention at all, honestly.
Yeah, so we did and we didn't. So okay, so what do I mean by that? The polls before the election, when they asked the questions, okay, how many Americans think that the country is headed in the wrong direction? It was over 70% that said yes, it's definitely headed in the wrong direction.
Wow.
Over 70% said it is headed in the wrong direction. This is right before midterm elections. And then you would expect to see a lot of seats flip when the number is that high in the polls. Like you don't see numbers that high often in the polls saying that, like, country totally headed in the wrong direction, administration is going totally the wrong direction, we need new administration. And then the election comes, it's a weird election. Looking at that, looking at the precedent and then looking at that. Now also, if we go back before that, the same thing happened before the 2020 election. There was also a talk of a red wave back then. And if you look at the past performance, of like when a president is elected and then goes to get reelected for second term, the way that the numbers play out, historically, the way this is played out previous elections. And there was a talk of a red wave before that election also. But that red wave didn't happen either. And how come that one didn't happen? And the reason why it didn't happen is because Joe Biden got the most votes out of any president ever in the entire history of the United States. He got all the other presidents that preceded him, no matter how popular they were. Joe Biden was way more popular than any of them, which was a little strange because when you looked, when you're watching on what they're showing you on TV, and you would see Trump drawing these humongous crowds, like filling stadiums and like, cars lined up outside of this, like, people as far as the camera could see. And
Yeah,
then you
I
go
found
to like a
myself.
Biden, you go to
I
like
found my.
a
Oh yeah,
Biden
go ahead.
one, and there's like 12 people there. And but this was the most, he got the most votes. He was the most popular ever out of any president ever, more than Obama, more than Trump, more than Reagan, more than anybody. And that's why the red wave didn't happen, because of the immense popularity and charisma that Biden brought to the table. He couldn't even draw a crowd more than 12 people, but somehow he got like over 80 billion votes and was the most popular ever in the entire history of the world. And not only that, it was the safest and most secure election that we've ever had, is what has been repeated this entire time from that first prediction of red wave until the current prediction of red wave that we're hearing now. So some of the same rhetoric we were hearing back then, we're hearing now. And so when I hear people talk about the red wave that failed, I'm like, yeah, you're right. That is what we're being told. And we're also being told that the reason why is because of the most popular president. Everybody loves him, myself included. I was chanting "Let's go Brandon" every time I saw the guy, and everybody else was chanting it too. We love the guy. We love him so much that we voted for him more and harder than anybody ever in the entire history of the United States, more than any other president. We are all behind this guy. Let's go Brandon. And so that defeated that red wave that was supposed to come in back in 2020, and then also it defeated the red wave that happened now. So like, also there's a lot of places where, key places where if things flip a certain way, there's going to be people who are really, really upset. And it's really interesting that in those same places every time, both back then and now, you have all of this business of, oh, well, we're not going to know the real results yet because, there's a lot of things going on here with the process of counting and tabulating and getting these things lined up. And just give us a little more time and go back to bed and wake up tomorrow and we'll tell you what happened. And we just need another day. Go back to bed. We'll tell you what happened tomorrow. And so that was another common thing that I saw from that previous prediction, red wave, also the current prediction of red wave. It's just, I mean, who doesn't love the guy? Let's go, Brandon. We're all behind him. We love him. Let's go. And he's overcoming these red waves because of his immense popularity, his connection with the people and what they really want to see and what they he's representing he's representing the people, and what's really meaningful in their lives and what they want to see happen. And also, just the way that things have gotten so much easier. Like I've been talking to so many people and nobody is struggling financially at all. Like, and it makes sense to me that he's so incredibly popular, just totally squashing out any possibility of any red wave that could have happened before or since. Just such an amazing guy. Let's go, Brandon, all the way.
That's right. Let's go me. I see what you're doing there. It's hilarious. Yeah, it really does make no sense at all, right?
Makes perfect sense. I'm telling you, the guy just he's so amazing.
Oh, that's hilarious.
And interesting too, like somebody as wonderful as he is, and that people would want to tarnish his reputation with these false accusations, like about his son's laptop, which was totally Russian disinformation. And what was it, like 30 something intelligence experts that signed a document saying, yes, this is definitely Russian disinformation. And then later, the New York Times is going to come out and say that that's false and that laptop was real. The New York Times are liars. I can't believe they're saying that about Brandon. This guy is awesome. They shouldn't be saying those things about this guy. They shouldn't, like total Russian disinformation that he would have anything to do with, the deep state activities in the Ukraine and all the stuff that went down there. There's so much information that came out there, and they're just throwing all this shit at the guy. Give the guy a break. He doesn't deserve any of that. He's wonderful.
Everyone's crushing out there.
Yeah, he's crushing it out there. Let's go, Brandon. Can't believe they say those things about him. And coming from the New York Times, one of the most trusted, worthy media outlets this country has ever seen, that they would go out and attack this guy. I just can't. It's just like makes me sick to my stomach.
That kind of is a weird one.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's so maybe they're trying to make it so obvious that it's
I mean, a
It's
big thing for me is like, I want to see the next generations prosper and thrive. Like I used to be a teacher. I have a lot of orientation in my thinking towards like what's happening with the next generations of the youth. The children, it's a cliche, the children are our future, but it's true. And when I look at Brandon and the way that, he's like petting the children's hair, and I'm like, he really cares about the children. And so does his son. And so does like that whole network. They really care about them. And so I think that's another reason why that red wave just fell so flat and why they came in so strong.
That's hilarious.
And, he wants to protect the ability. What if there's like a 6-year-old who wants to get their dick cut off? He's going to help them out with that. I mean, he's awesome. Who doesn't love the guy? That's why both of those red waves were squished. And then another interesting thing, you were told that if you questioned the integrity of any of the electoral results, for a year now we've been hearing this. If you question the integrity of any of that stuff, you're definitely a terrorist. And then before this, what was supposed to be this red wave, they started putting out this information like, you know what? There are a lot of vulnerabilities in these systems and in these machines. And so if some of this red wave that you might be hearing about, did you hear about Bill Gates made the prediction that these midterm elections would be a hung election and that it was going to push the country to civil war? I don't know the exact words. Look it up. He said this.
Oh man,
this is not a joke. He said this.
he's
And
hilarious.
it's really interesting because his ability to predict future events. I don't know if the guy has a crystal ball or if he's just got like this incredible intelligence team behind him, but down to very accurate details, he knows what's going to happen. Because before 2020, there was event 201, and down to the details, he knew exactly what was going to happen. This guy's got a crystal ball.
Oh yeah, I know all about Event 201.
Maybe his friend Jeff gave him the crystal ball. I don't know how he got such predictive capabilities, but it's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'm not too worried about a civil war though, because like most people can't even skip lunch. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. It's not gonna happen.
it might be online. There might be a civil war. It might look like there was one, but I'll know. I'll be like, no, those people are way too lazy.
When I look at the media outlets who are talking about most, where this phrase actually comes up the most, and I look at how incredibly trustworthy they are supposed to be, I'm like, what does that tell you about civil war? That they're the ones who keep repeating this over and over again. And also, if they're the ones repeating it, who are the 5 corporations that control all of those media outlets? And who is the one who controls those 5 corporations, or the ones, this, whatever this group is? Why would they want to seed our mindset with that? Because
Why?
whatever they want to seed the public perception with, the mindset, it comes out in their media outlets, and especially when they keep repeating it and repeating it. And so when I saw this getting repeated a lot in a lot of some of these news outlets, and then I looked at those ones that are so incredibly trustworthy and truthful, I was like, well, what does that tell you?
All you need to know.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. Yeah, I don't know.
Should we look at the what do you call it? Full moon chart?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
I'm about to start a fire over here.
I'm going to try to share the screen again. Let me know if this works.
I hope it does, because I'm starting a fire over here. I think I'll be fine. Oh yeah, perfect.
All right. So yeah, this is the full moon chart. This is 8th of November 2022. And full moon chart. So like I had said earlier, new moons are when you got sun and moon in the same position of the zodiac. Full moons are when you got sun and moon in opposite positions of the zodiac. And this is a full moon chart. That was a full moon that just happened on the 8th. And so that was sun and moon in opposite positions. And how do astrologers interpret that? So The sun is like your ego, your personality, that part of yourself that is seen out in the daylight of the sun is the symbolism there. You know, ruled by the sun or out in the daylight of the sun, the way that you're seen out in the sun. So that's like your outward personality. That's your ego. That's a part of yourself that you put out there when you're engaging with the world in the day-to-day activities that you engage in. You know, going to work, going to school, or whatever the tasks and accomplishments are that you do during the day. That's that side of your personality. It's your outer world and it's your outer self. And then the moon is the opposite. The moon is your inner world. It's your emotions and feelings on the inside. And it's also the home family environment, because that's where you turn towards after you've accomplished those tasks of the day, and you retire inwards towards the home. And then the moon rules the nighttime, and so it's also nighttime consciousness. So your connection with the dream time and the subconscious and the creative side of the mind and the kind of spiritual right brain type of thinking, imagination and creativity, and but also your feelings and your emotions, your inner world. So roughly, sun is your outer self and your outer world. Moon is your inner world and your inner self. And we've got sun over in Scorpio, and we've got moon over in Taurus. And the sun was actually conjunct with Venus over there in Scorpio, and also Mercury. So where the sun is in this chart is actually a sun, Venus, Mercury conjunction over there in Scorpio. And then moon is on the opposite side. So like we said, full moon, it's an opposition of sun and moon. And the moon also has a bunch of conjunctions going on. We got moon, Uranus, and the North Node all conjunct over there in Taurus. And well, here's something I'd like to point out at this point. So all around the wheel of the zodiac, you got the 12 signs, but these are also pairs. These are like twin opposites. There's like yin yang twins. And one of those yin yang twins is Scorpio and Taurus. So when you have a full moon, you get an interesting interplay between like the twin opposite pairs around the chart, because sun and moon are always going to be opposite when it's a full moon, and they're opposite in the zodiac. And then you get this interesting thing of looking at these opposite signs of what they represent. They're actually twins that are opposite of each other. And so we've got the sun, Mercury, and Venus over there in Scorpio, which is also the domain of intimacy. And it's also death and rebirth and transformation. So a lot of times when there's things happening with Scorpio, and there's a lot of Scorpio stuff that was going on just before this Mars retrograde, and also the last two moon events that we had, a lot of Scorpio stuff going on. So the new moon was in Scorpio, the previous event. And then now we've got this sun moon opposition where we've got these sun conjunctions going on over there in Scorpio as well. So these are themes that have to do with intimacy, also the deep feelings and emotions on the inside. That's also a big thing with Scorpio. And also, I just lost my train of thought. What was the other one? Death, rebirth, and transformation are big themes that come up with these Scorpio events. And what this kind of is like sometimes there are domains or areas in your life where you feel like you're going through a process of letting go of something old and progressing towards something new. And sometimes something that is old has to die so that you can move on towards the new, or it has to be let go of, it has to be released. And the interesting thing with Scorpio is Scorpio is fixed water, which represents deep desire. So Scorpio desires very deeply and doesn't want to let go. And Scorpio is that place in our lives where we confront issues where we are forced to let go. It's like you really, really didn't want to, and but you were forced to, and you had to learn how to let go. So there could be some issues of learning how to let go and learning how to move on. But this is taking place in that area of the sun, which is your outward personality and your outward self. And also it's conjunct with Mercury and Venus. So this also involves communication again. Mercury is communication, and Venus, this is the harmony and the balance principle, and also romance. So somewhere in the way that we are seeking balance in our outer lives, in our outer self, there are some themes surrounding these things coming up there as well. Now, the moon is over on the opposite side, and moon is conjunct with Uranus over there in Taurus. And Taurus is fixed earth. So along with Taurus comes themes of earth represents stability, and it also represents the material side of life, the materium. So the material body that you would have it in this realm, but also how do you get your money? How do you put your food on the table? How do you meet the practical earthly demands of this earthly life is also what earth represents. So there are some things going on in that world, and having the moon there, it's coming through kind of in our inner world, in our inner emotions. We're kind of going through a process of reevaluating what's happening there. Now, it's conjunct with Uranus over there. And Uranus is the nonconformist. Uranus wants to march to the beat of a different drummer. Uranus is a rebel. Uranus is totally different. Uranus is also where Uranus lands in the natal chart. Really interesting. The astrologer Tom Jacobs made this observation and shared it with me during a conversation I had with him. He said that where Uranus is in a person's natal chart often indicates a place where that person has like kind of like genius level stuff going on. They're 10 steps ahead. But Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, which also has to do with the social networks of life and the groups and communities that we belong to. So on the one hand, you've got this rebel nonconformist who wants to break out and be different. But on the other hand, the need to involve and integrate with groups and communities and involve with other people. So an interesting paradox that you have going on when you're talking about Uranus or when you're talking about Aquarius. And also with that genius 10 steps ahead thing that Uranus represents, but also this need to work with groups and communities and integrate with people, there could be this sense of like a little bit of strife going on there, because on the one side, you're 10 steps ahead and even a little bit genius level, but you're dealing with a world that is 10 steps behind. And you're like, how do we bridge this gap? Because we need to bring these things together somehow. I can see the future when I'm looking through the lens of Uranus, when I'm looking through the lens of Aquarius. We're looking into the future, we're looking towards a brighter future, and we're looking towards more freedom and more, doing things differently, finding unique and novel solutions to things. But then we're dealing with this world that is 10 steps behind, and there's this difficulty of trying to figure out how to bridge the gap in between, which is part of the big lessons that we're learning in life and that we're going through a lot of times in life. Now, this is happening in Taurus. So what does that mean? All of this is taking place in that domain of how do you earn your money? How do you put your food on the table? How do you get your resources? And with the moon there, it's kind of coming through in kind of like a personal, emotional type of way. In your inner world, you might be going through a process of kind of reevaluating, like, what type of friends have I been associating with? What type of groups or networks have I been forming with people? For some of us, we're finding our groove. We're finding better places to work with some of these energies. For some of us, we're going through a process of figuring out that some things didn't fit. Maybe that Scorpio change transformation process is coming through, and we're like, I think I need to let go of some of these old things so that I can move towards doing better things in some of these areas. But it's just interesting happening in Taurus. Now, really interesting thing with this chart, and then I think I'm gonna conclude this little thing I'm doing with this chart breakdown. There's a whole bunch of things going on in this chart, but what is the big trend that I'm looking at? The big takeaway for me is that there's a pattern of aspects happening here, and there's one big major one that's really standing out, and it's called a T-square in astrology. So along this opposition from Sun to Moon, you have Saturn squaring both of these, and that's what in astrology they call a T-square. It's when you have something that's squaring the two sides of an opposition. And what does Saturn represent? Saturn is stability. Saturn is also maturity and wisdom, but Saturnian energy is difficult because it can feel suppressive and repressive. It is a feeling of like kind of heavy energy. It is that kind of feeling that sometimes in life when things really slow down and the energy feels like it really slowed down. And what it's doing there is it's making you focus, and it's making you tap into like strength of character. It's making you follow that old-fashioned advice that says you've got to work hard, you've got to study hard, and you've got to climb that ladder of success by taking one steady step at a time. So there are lessons of stability and patience here as well. Patience. If you really want good things, you've got to work hard for them, and you've got to work at it over a long period of time. And also what Saturn represents is it is that thing that when the path gets difficult, are you going to stick with the path, or are you going to get off it? If you really want to progress along with something, then you have to say, no matter how difficult it gets, I'm going to stay the course. I'm going to learn those lessons of patience. I'm going to build that strength of character. I'm going to see my way through. No matter how difficult it gets, I'm going to learn patience. I'm going to take things steady, and I'm going to progress one steady step at a time until I reach that goal, even if it takes a really long time. These are lessons that Saturn brings in. On the negative side, Saturnian energy can sometimes be very suppressive and oppressive, though. And something interesting that we have playing out here is that Saturn started squaring Uranus in 2020. And this is going to continue until sometime into 2023. And the way that I've been kind of putting this into a short phrase And tell me if this sounds familiar, starting around 2020, going forward to the current time. It is the tension in society between hierarchy and authority and freedom and the broad social networks of life. That's what the Saturn Uranus square is.
Wow.
That started in 2020, and that's carrying forward until sometime in 2023. And not only that, but Saturn is over at Aquarius and Uranus is over in Taurus. And remember, we said Taurus, this is some of these practical material concerns of this earthly life that we live in, how you get your money, how you put your food on the table, real stuff that really matters. And one of the things that we've been seeing ever since 2020, we're talking about fixed earth with Taurus, we're talking about food sustenance, we're talking about, we've been hearing about supply chain disruptions, food distribution centers that are having all kinds of problems. There's talk about that we might run out of diesel fuel, and all the trucks that transport the goods and all the farm equipment and the tractors, they all run on diesel fuel. So what's that going to do to an already difficult situation? We've already been hearing about difficulties in supply chain disruptions, food distribution problems, all this stuff. Now, Uranus is coming in there and saying, hey, you need to think outside of the box here. You need to do things. Uranus does things totally different. Uranus is the rebel. Uranus breaks out of the old patterns and says there's always a different way to do things. And that's where you see people doing things like, hey, we can organize ourselves differently. We can grow our own food. We can start doing homesteading, community farming. We can trade and barter with our neighbors who are also growing their own food. Let's get back. Really interesting that Uranus and Taurus, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Jim Gale and Food Forest Abundance, but look that up. Jim Gale, Gale, and he's the head of Food Forest Abundance. And he started with this program, during this time. And it's all about getting back to basics, growing your own food. If you own a home and you have a yard, why are you not using it to grow food? Growing some lawn that produces nothing and you got to spray chemicals on it, that's stupid. Grow food there, and connect with other people who are growing their own food. And then we don't have to worry about supply chain disruptions or diesel running out or whatever, because you've got a network of people who can, so there's always others. So Uranus is encouraging us to reevaluate our friendships, our networks, the type of people we associate with, but also different ways of thinking about how to address some of these problems that have to do with, also Taurus represents finance and economy and money, like the bull market. And so it's also bringing some transformational thinking into there as well. And so, I think some really intelligent people I've heard talking about different ways of dealing with money altogether, where we're not even doing money anymore at all. What about other exchanges of value? Trading, bartering, other things that have value that we can trade with each other and don't even have to use a financial system. Really getting back to basics on some of these things. So these are some of the things. So I actually got off track a little bit because these new moon and full moon events are really short. And but there were some interesting things in the chart that relate to some longer term trends in astrology. And that's what I was kind of talking about at the end. But it relates to so much what we're seeing now. I couldn't help but kind of take it there a little bit. But anyhow, that's not all stuff that's going on just with this moon chart or this moon event. Those tend to be really fast transits that kind of come and go often. But there are some longer term trends in astrology, like that Saturn Uranus square, that I find really interesting, looking at what's been happening since 2020, going up towards 2023, and to have Saturn Uranus square coming in at that time, just the way the symbolism matched up. I find that topic really fascinating.
Yeah, that is super fascinating. It's like played out, perfectly. Really quickly, shout out to Caribe Root. She says, I have an affiliate Food Forest Abundance account. I got my Food Forest design and just spoke to a guy today to contract some people to help me install. Contract me to help you install. I'll come by. I'll come help.
Food Forest Abundance, one of the things he's doing is people who are interested in having a franchise business, he's made it really affordable. Usually to start a franchise, you need to have like deep pockets kind of in a certain area. There's always a certain amount of money, even for the cheap ones. It's still a pretty big amount of money. He's taken it way down to like a level that ordinary people can afford. And so that you could actually be a person who goes out and does the installations and has a team that you work with. Yeah, a lot of amazing things going on there. Some people might be interested in that for a career path. You could, I think you spend somewhere around like $3,000 to start heading your own team, but then you've got to do your own marketing and getting business or whatever. But you could become a franchisee for like, I think it's around, I don't know, a few $1,000s, whatever it is, somewhere around there. Which compared to other franchises, that is way lower.
Oh yeah. She said, so Karibe says, haha, Brandon, I got you in mind for another phase of the work. Yeah, she wants me to put a robe on and wander around her garden like Jesus.
That would be good too. I think you need to do that as well.
Yeah, I'm totally available for that gig.
Or garden tarot readings.
Yeah, there you go.
Tarot readings in the garden with Brandon. I would totally sign up for that.
Yeah, let's do it. I like it. And then I can have some guy turn me into the Romans while I'm wandering in the garden.
That's so cool that Karibe is doing that.
Yeah.
I first heard of food forest abundance on the Freeman perspective. I don't know if anybody listening is familiar with that, but that was where I first heard of it.
I don't think I'm too familiar.
A lot of cutting edge ideas. I kind of sometimes hear them there first before I hear them anywhere else. It's interesting. Ooh. Freeman Fly, the Freeman perspective, or Freeman TV.
No, I love that idea. That's great. It's crazy. So what about Jupiter?
Jupiter. So
it's been so bright.
Oh, okay. So anybody who's listening, if you're interested in this topic, I strongly recommend you check out the channel Gemini Brett. He's on social media in a few different places. He's also on YouTube under Gemini Brett. And he's been doing work for a long time, doing some pretty heavy duty studies in astronomy, and then also looking at how does it match up with actual observations you can go outside and do, and how does that stuff match up with astrology. So, and he's making big improvements in all of these areas by bringing all these things together, because sometimes it gets so theoretical that people aren't even doing real observations anymore and seeing, are these things actually matching up and what's going on out there. So he's bringing a lot of these things together, and he has discussed some of these things about when the planets appear so much brighter than at other times. And he does very skilled breakdown of these concepts if anybody wants to learn more about that. You know, various explanations of why we see that. We go out and look at the sky, that sometimes it appears so much brighter and at various times of the year. Some of this has to do with synodic cycles. So, you know, in math, you have sine waves. And if you're looking at the movement of these things that we see in the sky, anything that goes in a repeating pattern can have like a sine or a cosine type of, you know, we're talking about wave type patterns. So in math, waves are modeled with like sine and cosine. And so that's where that word comes from. So he's done some work explaining these sinusoidal cycles with the planets. But what Jupiter represents in astrology is it is the expansion principle. And Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius. And interesting thing here is to contrast Jupiter with Saturn, because they're sort of opposites in a certain way. So we discussed some of Saturn when I was discussing the chart. So there are some things like, you know, that old-fashioned advice, you got to work hard, you got to study hard. And learning lessons about patience and perseverance and strength of character. And staying on the difficult path, even when it gets difficult, because you want to achieve that long-term goal and you've got to stick with it. And so Saturn slows things down, makes you focus. Things kind of get a bit serious. It feels a bit heavy when you've got like Saturn, especially when you've got like Saturn returns or big Saturn transits happening in your life. Some of that energy can be coming in. Now, Jupiter is the opposite. Jupiter brings luck and good fortune and easy blessings. Jupiter gives you those slow pitches where it just lets you knock it out of the park. You know, like, so Saturn makes you work really hard, doesn't give you anything easy. You've got to really bust your butt to get things going with Saturn energy. Jupiter is the opposite. Jupiter comes along with gifts and blessings and free things for everybody. And Jupiter is the optimist, cheerfulness and hope, and also raising the mental vibration state of the mind higher so that you can open up new doorways and opportunities in the future. It's kind of like some law of attraction type thinking going on with Jupiter. And it's the expansion principle. So it's areas in your life where you have the ability to really expand is also part of what Jupiter represents. And Jupiter rules over Sagittarius, and this is connected with higher philosophy. So interesting connection here. We talked about opposite pairs of signs a little bit. One of the pairs of opposites is Gemini and Sagittarius. And they form an axis, and this is the learning axis, the learning and understanding axis. On the Gemini side, it's all about information processing, learning how to process information and how to communicate it. On the Sagittarius side, it is still learning about the world around you. There's still curiosity and learning about the world around you, but it's in experiences. So it's actually going out into life and having new experiences and learning about the world that way. And also bringing yourself into contact with experiences to test your knowledge and to test your understanding and see, does it really work out in the real world? And so Jupiter has to do with the way that we seek and find new opportunities, new places to explore, and new places to have contact with experiences. So Jupiter classically in astrology has also been associated with like travel, contact with foreign cultures, and also higher education and learning, which touches into like higher philosophy. And two more quick points, and then I'm done with my little summary for some of what Jupiter represents. There is also like a moral and a theological side to this higher philosophy that Jupiter represents as well, and that Sagittarius represents. So not just taking learning about the world around you, like in Gemini, it's all information. All the information that you could gather, Gemini wants to get a little piece of everything and wants to come tell you about it. And they're wonderful communicators about things you never heard of. And they've heard a little bit about everything. They've picking up all kinds of scraps of things and new interesting things. They've explored it all. But on the Sagittarius side, it's like, but how do we use this morally? Is there a moral purpose behind this? Is there a purpose that can have us vibrate higher? And this is part of what Sagittarius and what Jupiter represent as well. Now, I've highlighted a lot of the really positive aspects with Jupiter, and there are a lot of positive aspects, but it almost sounds too good to be true. It's just you get free things and you get luck and easy blessings and doors opening up in front of you. And sometimes life is like that. Sometimes you're in a flow and just things are just going so well, doors are just opening up. But when you are in that space, you can sometimes get into like delusions of grandeur. You think you're invincible. You're like, oh, I'm always going to get the magic to work. Hey, the magic has been working for such a long time now. I'm always going to get the magic to work. And you can actually get into a, little bit of a diluted state of mind, and you have to bring things back to reality. That's some of what Saturn represents. Saturn brings it back and makes it real again and says, hey, you got to slow back down again because, the magic does work and you can learn lessons about how to get the magic to work, but it's not going to work 100% of the time, all the time, every time. Or else the game would just be rigged in your favor and you'd be God. So, sometimes, and here's one of the big lessons that I see with Jupiter is that, just like in the ocean, you've got the ebb and the flow. So the waves crash in and then they recede again and then they come in again. Same thing in life. Sometimes it's flowing forward and new doorways are opening up and new opportunities. And when that happens, recognize that it's happening and get on that wave and ride that wave and really make the most of it. But then also recognize that it's going to recede back in the other direction at other times. And when that happens, don't fall apart and go to pieces and say, oh my God, the world's against me. You just got to recognize that that's a time when you got to retract. You got to take on some of those other lessons. You've got to, whatever they are, there are other things coming through in life where you've got to focus on some other things. And you've got to, maybe you even have to turn inward for a little while, but it's going to come back around the other way again. There's always an ebb and flow. It's going to sometimes flow this way and sometimes flow back out the other way. So learning how to take advantage of both of these things is where you want to get to, not fighting against the energy. You want it to go, oh, it's going this way and I want it to go the opposite way. And it's like, hey, you're fighting against something that you're not going to win that battle. You got to find the flow. You got to go with the flow. And so when things are moving and flowing forward and you're having those great luck and opportunities and new doorways opening up in front of you, recognize that it's happening, ride that wave, capitalize upon that, but also recognize there's going to be other times when you're going to have to deal with the other direction. This could be things like, hey, when you're making good money, don't just go spend it all. You got to be saving some of it too, kind of a trite example, but
No, I like it. It reminds me a lot of poker because I used to be a very avid poker player. And now I do it once in a while, but it seems the last few years, it just, whenever I went to play, it just didn't go my way. And then this year I've been on fire and I haven't played a lot, but I went up. The first sign was I went to play like a cash game, and I left and I was up like $25, which is, whatever. But I was like, I didn't lose. I'm like, this is great. Then I played a tournament and I won like 15 or $1,600. And then I went and played cash, and I won some, like, they had a promotion going where every hour they would pick one table, and there was like 40 tables, and our table got picked, and I was the one that won that promotion. It was like $300, and then plus I won money at the table, especially in that hand. It was so funny. So I won like $900, like, but I'm on a roll. So now I'm thinking, should I play poker a little more often? Like, and then I was, maybe I'm in one of those waves, because I've definitely felt it both ways, because I've been playing probably about since 2009. And I know exactly what you're talking about now that I can recognize those waves. And even they happen within one tournament too. It's the same thing. You'll get like a smaller ebb and flow. So I've noticed that when it's ebbing one way, I go for it. And then when things don't go my way, I just pull back a little more. And it's worked out very well for me in tournaments too. So, hey, maybe I'll be a pro poker player.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Travel, go to Vegas.
Yeah. I really like Vegas. I mean, they're probably crazy there now, but I haven't been there since 2018. But I flew in the night of the shooting that happened.
Wow.
But I used to go like twice a year for conferences for DJing. That's how I know all this stuff about promotion and social media. It all crosses over. But
There is this one
yeah.
guy I used to work with many years ago. And so like one day he shows up with not a totally new car. He bought it used, but good used car though. And it was new to him. It was a new car for him. So anyhow, shows up with car that he just bought, and nice, decent car, and he wanted playing poker, and he used to go online and play poker games, and like it's just like he wasn't really into like sports or watching football or none of that other kind of. He was just constantly playing poker, and he was playing so much he took a trip out to Vegas, and came back with a new car.
Yeah, I've heard some crazy stories.
He played so much. He got really good at it,
I've been a
there
few
is some
hands
skill.
away
It's
from
not
making
like
like a lot of money. It's crazy.
Say
Like
that
if I
again?
had, I've been a few like if a certain hands that I had in tournaments went another way. Like I just had shitty luck. I was like way ahead, and then by the rest of the cards come out, then I get beat. Like certain hands, I could have won a lot of money if they went a different way. It's crazy, but I still have done very well, and I'm up overall. But yeah, that can happen. It's in the way I look at it too, in the whole sense. It's like it reminds me of the dice game in the Bhagavad Gita. You know what I mean? Like there's some element of that's allowed. I think that fits into, I don't know, morality or whatever, when it's like a game everyone's signing up for. It's different when it's like blackjack and you're just giving it to the casino,
Yeah.
but at least this way you're playing other people, and it's like a level playing field. There's people there that are millionaires. There's people that's their last $100. You know what I'm saying? It's all even playing field. I love it.
Yeah. Interesting thing with poker though is that it's not all entirely luck. There actually is skill also involved. And so, just through playing so much, this guy just got really good at it because he was just bored. So he was just constantly playing poker on the computer, and then just went out and got a car.
That's awesome. Great story. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you always hear the horror stories of Vegas. It's like, because they don't play poker. Because when you go there, if you're here in Connecticut where I live, there's 2 casinos. So when I go there, it's like always the same people, and all they do is sit there all day and play poker. So they're really good. Even if they're not a good player, they're still very experienced. So it's a lot tougher. You go to Vegas, it's people that play like once a year. They're out there just having a good time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you make money. It's crazy. Like even when I went there for conferences, I would pay for everything just by playing poker. It's nuts. So yeah.
Another interesting thing I'm noticing with Mars and Gemini and all of this Scorpio energy preceding it as well is because Scorpio is the house of intimacy. Scorpio has this stereotype associated with it of being paranoid. And this actually relates to its rulership over the house of intimacy. Because if you look at what happens with intimacy, so there's one stage of relationships when you're not taking things serious. You're dating, you're checking out the scene, you're going on dates with people to just see what feels right. It's just, I don't know, I liked dating that person, but something didn't feel right. I'd try something else. You're just checking out the scene, not taking things to, or maybe you just want to flirt, you just want to have fun, that type of thing. But Scorpio, we're talking about when things get serious. This is a relationship that has taken a turn towards the serious. Now we're going to be intimate. And that means that this person, you're going to be taking them into your inner world. So they're going to see a lot more about you. They're going to see what makes you tick, what works on, what's hiding in the closet, what's going on in the shadow, your psychology. They're going to see everything. They're going to see you naked. And it's really scary to bring somebody into that world of intimacy. Now, Scorpio is very tough and protective on the outside because it is protecting these very soft emotions on the inside. It is the place where we are most vulnerable, intimate relationships. It is a place where you could be emotionally hurt and take on emotional damage even. And so that is why there is this tough exterior and this paranoid, because it is so scary to bring people into that inner world. And Scorpio wants to protect that inner world. But Scorpio also desires intimacy, wants to have that level of intimacy. And something you'll see with people with really strong Scorpio placements is that even in their just ordinary friendships, they're very picky. And that's because they hate fakeness. They want real people. They need people who they can really get real with. And they investigate. And if they can't get real with that person, they're just like, I don't want nothing to do with them. Don't take it personal, but just no, that person's not for me. I need real people I can really get serious with. And even in their just ordinary friendships, they have that kind of intensity and seriousness and that desire for intimacy and to be real with things. But because of this, Scorpio is also the psychological investigator. Scorpio has been described in so many different ways, I've seen this described in so many different ways, and a way to encapsulate it is penetrative psychological insight. Always looking behind the surface of things. What's really going on behind the curtain? What's really going on back there? They're the ones who don't ever let up on that stuff. What's really going on though? And with Mars in Gemini, Mars in the pre-modern astrology is the traditional ruler of Scorpio. And Gemini is mind, intellect, and communication. And look at all of these distortions that we've been seeing coming through in the world of news and information and media and communication, especially since that Saturn-Uranus square of 2020.
Yeah.
But we're getting at a point now where we're also looking at our relationships with others and even relationships in the broader sense in society. And we're looking at this Mars retrograde, reviewing, reassessing, and reanalyzing, like, where are we really going with communication? Because something has gone way off track, way off the rails. That we need to rewind a bit and reevaluate and reassess where we're at. And I think one of the things we've been seeing is a lot of people who are way ahead of the curve on this stuff. And that's the people who are doing their own information processing, information analyzing, and communicating about it. The alternative space of communication and media, the alternative researchers, the alternative podcasters, some people were ahead of the curve on this and said, hey, we got to do our own because it is so corrupted out there. That's the other thing. Scorpio is looking for where things are corrupted, distorted, that psychological penetrative insight, looking behind the surface of things. And there's some deep concerns there with Scorpio. So having Mars going retrograde in Gemini, I think what we might be seeing is we've been seeing this steadily increase. More and more people starting to become a little bit more aware of, like, I don't know exactly what it is. I just know that something's not right about the information I'm getting. And I think we're going to be getting to a point where even some of the normies we're going to see some of them, like, some of them are going to surprise us. We're going to be like, I thought there was no way in hell you were going to start reevaluating this stuff. I thought you were just going to believe everything. But I think we're going to see some of them start to, like, reassess, reevaluate, like, what's really going on? Like, something is not coming through in this communication, in this information. Something's distorted, Maybe that's just wishful thinking on my part, but I have seen a huge increase in a certain interval of time. There was a huge change that came through in a positive direction. I've seen that much, but in terms of it going even to another stage, what I just described, that might be a little bit wishful thinking on my part. I hope not, but anyhow.
Well, if it does, I'll tell you that there's a lot of people who think something's up, but they're just going along with it. So if some people start to wake up that don't see it and they see it, then the other people in the middle will know that it's okay to then express how they feel. You know, they're like, yeah, that's what I think too, you know, and then they're going to make statues of people like me. Oh, it's going to be crazy. I say that because of not only have I had a consistent message this whole time, but also in the chat, because I was talking about strolling through the garden earlier. Zeralath said we'll get a Brandon statue for her garden. And then Krebe said, wait, did I get that wrong? Oh yeah, Zeralath said I need a Brandon statue. And then Krebe said that, and then I said they'll just tear it down in 50 years, you know.
I was just going to say that somebody's going to say it's not properly communist enough. We need to tear that statue down.
Exactly. That's hilarious. And
I
another
mean, you're
kind
totally white, you know, like it might be a little.
What'd you say?
You're totally white. That statue just might have to come down.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, then they confuse me with the Italians. It's so gross. I'm like, what is white even? Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say my Uranus is in Scorpio.
Oh wow, that's cool.
So that would kind of apply with what you were talking about, but just on a grander sense, a different sense.
Uranus being that Uranus breaks through old paradigms, things that are still that should have been broken through a long time ago. Uranus wants to break through those things, and Uranus can have kind of some erratic energy. It's a little bit difficult to contain.
Yeah, you know.
But also, like Tom Jacobs said, that place where you're a little bit 10 steps ahead and trying to figure out integrate with that world that's 10 steps behind. But you know, in that domain of Scorpio, so there's a lot of different ways this could. You might see this play out in your life. It could be in the world of intimacy. It could be in your own, you know, death and rebirth transformation processes that you go through. You might see it there, or you might see it in a more mental way. You know, you're an air sign. It could even be coming through more in that mind intellect way. In terms of like that information, that psychological processing of looking behind things and what's happening there, and kind of being a little bit 10 steps ahead on things and looking back at the world 10 steps behind and being like, how do we bridge this gap? I could see that. I could see that being one of the ways it comes through for you. I mean, look at what we're doing now and what you've been doing with this program, you know.
Yeah,
oversharing and the brand of Bonanza and all that. That's a big thing going on there. Is like, hey, there's got to be some way we could bridge this gap of communication, you know, between what we're moving towards and what's 10 steps behind over here. There's got to be some way we can meet these things in the middle. We got to do it somehow. You know,
exactly. Humor, I found, is the best way so far.
Yeah.
One of the best. There's other methods, but yeah, humor works really well when used properly. But yeah, I like that. And the intimacy thing too hits home for me, because that's some stuff I went through. I used to have some pretty severe intimacy issues.
I've heard you say that before, and I wanted to jump in and say, I think the word severe is incorrect, because we all have intimacy issues.
Well, I'll just say it this way.
It's such a personal, it's such a, so Scorpio covers all of these domains in life that are where we're at our most vulnerable and most tender. So it's just the stuff that happens there is just really deep, and it just takes a lot of processing to work through. So I actually think all of us have intimacy. I don't think there's a single person on the planet that doesn't have intimacy issues.
Sure. Oh, the reason I use severe is because I used to say like sex addiction or whatever. My friend's like, don't say that. She's like, say severe intimacy issues. And I'm like, thank you. And I changed it in my book and everything. So now I just say severe to kind of warn people, like, you want to talk about it, we can, but it was severe, but no, I'm not in a victim way, but just in a, it's going to get crazy, these stories.
That is a good language hack for it. Makes it a little bit more empowering than, you know, the previous way we were saying it. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, because I don't agree with that term. It's just a colloquial way that people understand it. So I was just saying it, you know, and she's like, that's a little abrasive. I'm like, you're right. Thank you.
But something that I really like is how you're so open and honest about it, because for some people that's just taboo. They're just not going to discuss that, so I think it's refreshing for somebody to just say, hey, what's the big deal? We all got this stuff going on, let's talk about it. I find
Yeah.
that refreshing,
Well,
because
thank
I
you.
I see
Go ahead.
myself in a similar way. Like um I'm like, why not talk about it? That's how you work through things. Communication is pretty big for me. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And I used to tell these stories like at work the next day. People would be like, "And then what happened?" Like so, like I'm used to telling the stories anyway, but now I could tell different stories in a different way, and instead of trying to incite lust or whatever, it's more about learning lessons. But yeah, it's an amazing journey, and it still continues every day. It's like there was a point where I had like a shift in my aperture or the way I saw the world, and a lot of things just immediately fell away. It was crazy. But there's still other aspects of it that you got to work through, and it's been a really good challenge. But I like it because the way that I look at it now is, even if I fail, there's not really a failure. It's just a cycle that comes back
Yes.
around,
I like that you use the word journey. I think that's the perspective to take on it. That it's a journey. I
Yeah, it
like I
is.
like
Like
that
when
word
people,
choice.
even self-healing isn't correct, because that would imply that there's something wrong with you, but you
Yeah, and
can't
then
get to
also
where
that
you're
you're going to
going
heal it,
without.
and then everything's going to get perfect. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you got to let this be an unfolding journey that's just going to keep unfolding. It's an adventure. It's or as Chance says, the obstacles are the course. Like, how much fun were obstacle courses when you were a kid? Well, the obstacles are the course. So it's a journey. It's fun. You got to keep letting it unfold. Journey is an excellent word for that, I think.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, it's a fun one though. I mean, it's like I said, in the synchronicities sometimes when you pay attention are just absolutely insane, and the cycles and stuff that happen. It's like, all right, I see this coming now. It's kind of like you were saying earlier, when you feel Jupiter's energy, like with the wave when it's coming and it's really bright and it's really working out for you, you go for it. And then when you realize that it's not, then you just put your head down or whatever it is.
Yeah, I kind of see it as like there are other things that you're maybe being called to put your attention towards, and those things might also be flowing very well, but you'd miss that transition if you were just caught up in like, oh, poor pitiful me, my luck ran out in this one area where I wanted it to just keep flowing forever. And it's like, hey, that's the time when you're supposed to shift gears and start working on the next thing or the other thing that you were supposed to be paying attention to. If so, yeah, maybe you really enjoyed that run you were on and the place where you were on that run. But if you're just always caught up in oh, poor pitiful me, the world is against me because why did I lose it? And it's like, instead of looking at what you lost, look at other areas where you should be focusing, because there's other areas where you're going to be gaining. There's never you never where it's all going to be taken away.
Yeah. And if you're someone who's like scientific minded, think about it as electricity, like you have energy and you're using it in this negative way when you could just be channeling it to something else. It's kind of like if someone's going to try to start a fight with you or something, you could always channel the energy in a different way, and you could channel it into comedy and have that release that way. Or somebody's in like what is that one, judo, where you take the other person's energy.
Yeah, you
It's the same kind of
redirect it.
thing. Yeah, you just redirect that energy. Exactly, that's what I was digging at. So when it comes at you, you just redirect it in a different way. Or when the time isn't, something's not working out, you just take your energy and direct it somewhere else instead of just going into the victim thing, because that's so easy to do. I was talking about
Yeah.
that last night. It's like this whole society or whatever is just set up for you to be such a comfortable victim. Like
Right.
everyone's there to be like, oh, are you okay? Like, even when I got into this car accident recently, it was the other guy's fault. So the cop's like, you're the victim in this. I don't know. I might have said this before, but he's like, you're the victim in this. And I'm like, oh, like, don't call me a victim. But I was like, no, yeah, you're right. I go, but typically I'm not a victim. And I had a conversation with him about this stuff too, about not lying and just, all this stuff about victim consciousness. And he was just looking at me like dude, you're killing it right now. He's like, this is what everybody's doing. I'm like, yeah, I know.
That's
It's
hilarious.
hilarious. Yeah,
You,
like
you
I used
cringed.
to,
You cringed when he said
yeah,
victim. You're like, ah.
yeah. I'm like, no, not a victim. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you meant, but did you have to say it that way?
Not the V word.
Yeah. But what a couple pair of excellent analogies you laid out there. So definitely electricity, and then redirection of energy, you know, redirection of momentum, or even if we're talking about sports or martial arts, you know, redirection is going to be the key. You know, if you try to always go against, you're just going to have nothing but injuries and concussions, and you know, you got to learn how to redirect the energy. But then electricity, I mean, some really fascinating topics going on there. How much of our world is electric? I don't think anybody has really properly
All of it.
answered this yet, except for Tesla. I think he figured it out, but I think the rest of us have been slacking ever since. There's the electrical side of the body, the bioelectric field that's going on, and then this sound stuff with the cymatics, and we find out how that impacts the body and the consciousness. You know, consciousness itself might be an electrical phenomenon. There might be an electric universe, even. You know, like who knows how far this goes? But I think there's something going on with that electrical domain.
Oh yeah, 100%. Really quickly, somebody Robo Honky, which shout out to Robo Honky. It's still my favorite YouTube handle.
Okay.
Is there a website I can go to find out what's in my chart?
Yeah, go to actually there's a bunch you can do. I mean, you could even just type in your favorite search engine, you know, how to get your natal chart, NATAL, your natal chart, um, and go from there. Or what I've heard so many people say is that astro.com, there's this website, Astrodienst, and you just type in astro.com, and everybody says that's the most accurate. And
Is
I've
it
just,
Astro Theme?
no,
Oh,
astro.com. Astro Theme is
Astro.com.
pretty good too. I use Astro Theme sometimes, but astro.com is the one that I've heard so many astrologers say that it's the most accurate. And I don't even know exactly why. I've just been following suit ever since. I'm just like, hey, everybody says it, it must be true. But someday I'd like to learn more about why they are saying that's the most accurate, but it's supposed to be. But I mean, you know, how big are the differences going to be? I've played around using different ones and they all come out the same. So I don't know what they mean by the most accurate, or how incredibly accurate do you have to be with this? You know, you just want the basic picture. You want to learn your natal chart. So like, yeah, there's a lot of great free places where you can do it. You can even just type in your favorite search engine, how do I get my free natal chart, or how do I get a natal chart? And yeah, start working with it. I think it's really powerful stuff. I think it takes you on a journey of something that I call knowledge of self, um, which is when you turn towards like the inner path. Brandon and I have discussed this before, I think on and off air, so to speak, you know, like you know, relationship with some of the themes that Michael Tsarian talks about, and when he talks about the book of the Tao. And by the way, also go get that book, read the book of Tao. That's awesome. That inner path, getting to know yourself on the inside. How are you going to have harmony in the external world if you haven't done work on learning about the harmony of what's going on in your inner world first? So yeah, you got to learn about, and also taking responsibility for what's going on in your own domain. You know, learning about yourself, I think it's really powerful. I think you can unlock talents and abilities, but also you got to look at some of the, it's like a Clint Eastwood movie. You got to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. So when you address all of those things, then I think that's when you get a lot of empowerment going on. You can, so yes, you want to learn things about your, you know, hidden talents and abilities you might have. And yes, you want to empower yourself, but you also got to take ownership of, you know, what's happening in the shadow side of things and what's happening in the darker corners as well. And then, you know, when you bring in that whole picture, puts you on a path of what I call knowledge of self. And it's doing that inner work and brings better harmony to your own personal life, which then also helps you have better harmony in your external life as well. I think it's just incredibly powerful stuff. There are times when I've been working on it and just have had like weird synchronicities and echoes of things coming back in other unexpected places, almost like the universe is winking at you, telling you you're on the right path. They're just like crazy things that happen. Crazy, like unexpected or whatever, but also those experiences where you feel like certain things in life start flowing and you're in like a positive flow, like you're expanding and you're flowing forward. And um, yeah, there's just a lot of amazing things that happen when and it's not just astrology, by the way. That's just happens to be my favorite tool, but there's a whole bunch of different things you could use to do that type of work where you learn more about yourself, where you learn more about going into that inner path. And I kind of see it as like when you go into the inner path, there is an inner path and there's an inner adventure and an outer adventure that both expand at the same time, is what happens there. You start to open some of the doors, and then it also opens doors in your external world as well. And you start to see an adventure unfolding there in front of you. And so, um, a lot of different self-reflection tools you could use to do these things. Astrology just happens to be my favorite one. But yeah, working with those energies, I think, could be incredibly empowering and also fun and interesting.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a great thing to highlight, that any of these tools like tarot or astrology or the Kabbalah or any of these things that can sound evil to people, when you're using them as a tool for self-knowledge, that's really where I think the true alchemy happens, where the true lead gets turned into gold. And yeah, you can use that stuff in the physical to control people and to manifest and maybe turn lead into real gold. I don't know. But I think that the proper use of it is at least to first do it to yourself. Like if the oxygen mask falls out of the plane and the cabin loses pressure, you put the mask on yourself first.
But yeah, that was always the thing that you hear when you look at people who have studied the actual alchemical manuscripts from the Middle Ages. That's always the thing that they come away saying. They say they weren't talking about turning physical lead into physical gold. I mean, on one level, they sort of were, but it is so obvious that there were so many other layers in the narrative and in the text that they were speaking on, and that the biggest thing they were talking about was a philosophical transformation, and that the lead had to do with like materialism and the material physical body, and then also a certain type of mindset, and then transmuting that stuff into a higher state of vibration, which represented by the sun as the solar and as the color of gold and as the light. But really they were talking about like a philosophical transformation, something taking place in the realm of the spirit and of the mind, raising that vibration higher, achieving a better state of mind, a higher state of mind.
Yeah.
Even like a more moral state of mind, like getting rising above some of the impulses that go along with the physicality of the material world that we live in. So if you're always operating from your appetites, your lower appetites, that's a low vibrational energy, and that was like lead is like the lowest vibrational energy in alchemy. So which is like sort of like the discussion of chakras. You've got these lower chakras and higher chakras, and they're saying, okay, so you've got all of these, it's a system working within you. But if you're always vibrating out of the lower ones, then you're in that state of lead. You're in that low vibrational state. You've got to raise up into the higher chakras, higher consciousness.
Yeah, I love that. The higher of throat and above, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's oh man, I love the lower appetites, putting it that way. Because after this, I'm gonna go totally devour some tapioca pudding that I have, because I went out to eat with my parents and I had some. We went to the local diner right down the street, and it's delicious. And they give you some to-go tapioca. But anyway, oh yeah. So what I was gonna say is, it's like the perfect parable, right? Turning lead into gold, because it hits people in the crowd differently that are listening to the person talk about it or whatever, read about it. Like the more materialistic person is going to think about real gold, and
Right.
those appetites are going to take over, and then the other people, it's going to hit them, and then some people in the middle are going to be like, oh, that sounds, and then they're gonna, it's crazy. So that's how I kind of feel how Jesus portrayed in the Bible would speak in parables, because of that same thing. He was like transferring information but not making claims. It's
Oh yeah, and also culpable deniability.
exactly.
Like you could say something, and then people say, did you say this? Well, let's look at what exactly I said. And then it's like, yeah, but there's so many different ways to interpret it. It's like, okay, there you go. Now it's on you and not on me anymore.
Exactly.
It's very, very clever. Interesting that you brought that up because I have one of my old friends from that I went to college with has this like little reading club. They're reading through sections of the Bible, and I just read the book of Matthew not too long ago, and I actually really love the Gospels. Bible, generally speaking, I find a very fascinating area of study. Took a course on it when I was in college, and then also did some reading after college. But I've always loved the Gospels, and I just read, or no, I'm sorry, I said Book of Matthew. Book of Mark was the one that I read.
What's your favorite gospel?
Um, Not sure. It might be John because I kind of see John as like a little bit hardcore. It's a little bit in your face, like kind of. I don't know. It's a little bit like slapping people upside the head. A little. Maybe it's the ascendant Scorpio in me that likes things to get a little bit nitty gritty and get a little down and dirty a little bit too. Kind of John's a little bit, in your face and smacking people, and it's like I could see some people kind of being like, "Oh, I don't like that one so much." Some divisive language comes through sometimes. It's like I don't know. It's interesting. And then Mark being what academics think is like the first of the synodic gospels, or what was the term?
Canonical.
Anyhow, forget off the top of my head.
Canonical.
No, it's so
Concubine. No,
Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's this interesting study. Concubine. Matthew, Mark, and Luke. There's this interesting conversation in the world of like academia about those gospels, which is that they think that Mark came first and that Matthew and Luke were based upon Mark. And the reason why they say that is because there will be disagreement between the other two, and sometimes disagreement with the other one, but there is never disagreement in the other direction, which makes it really look like if you're looking at did one of them come before the others, then based on like just the structure of that argument, if one actually did come before the others, it would be Mark. And then Matthew and Luke would be based upon Mark. And then John is just very different from the other ones.
Its own thing. Creepy
John is
Root
also
says
the Aquarius.
synoptic.
John's a badass. John is also the Aquarius. John's the water bearer.
Yeah.
He's Aquarius in the astrology.
Yeah, that's pretty badass.
Somebody in the chat had to come.
Yeah, Creepy Root said synoptic.
I think that's it.
No, Creepy, it's concubine. I told you. My hilarious joke.
It's concubine or synoptic. And so like, Mark believed to be the first of the synoptic gospels. And it has something to do with it coming through in the Greek. And then the analysis of like, well, was there one that came first? Well, if there was, it looks like it would have to be Mark. And then those three together are the synoptic gospels.
Yeah, interesting you say that because John was always my favorite, even when I was very young reading the Bible. I was always into John. And then later I learned it's more of like the esoteric stuff. I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's why I ended up having it as maybe the favorite for a while. I'm not sure I have a favorite anymore. I need to read them again and see, do I have a favorite now? What would it be? Or, has my opinion changed over the years? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've read it, but it was nice to sit down and read that one again.
Yeah, me too. But I think I sidetracked you. You were talking about something you read recently.
Oh, was I?
In a books club. Yeah. See,
no.
What a good host I am.
They were reading sections from the Bible, and then when they got to the Gospels, I had joined in, and then I read Mark. That was what I was saying.
But I think you were bringing it up though for a reason.
Oh, right. If it was, then I think I lost that reason. That one flew out the window. How sometimes when you're talking when the camera's on, like sometimes you're in the flow and things are going just how you wanted them to. There are certain things you wanted to talk about. You maybe ahead of time you thought of a few things you wanted to hit. You hit all of them. You're like, oh, it's going great. And then there's other times when in the middle of speaking, you're like, I just completely lost my train of thought because I was worried about like Sharon was looking at me like, did I just say something weird? And then something distracted me. And then all of a sudden I lost the thought altogether. It's so weird. Every time I record, there's at least one moment when something like totally short circuits, and I'm just like, I don't know what happened, but that thought is gone.
Yeah, that happens to me sometimes on the Oversharing show, and I'm like, oh no, where was I going? Because I'll just start going too far off on a tangent, and then I'm
Yeah.
like, oops. But Sharon's pretty
Another
good
one
at
of the
bringing it
reasons
back.
why I love Freeman Fly at Freeman TV, because he does it he does it like every single broadcast where he'll be in the middle, it'll just lose his track right in the middle of his sentence and just be like, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry, I lost that one. And I
Oh,
could
that's
totally
hilarious.
relate. I'm like, I think if you have a lot of air in your natal chart, then air is mind, intellect, and communication. And you're going to be intelligent, but you're also an airhead. And it's just what happens. You're going to sometimes just totally lose that train. Somebody opened the window, that train of thought flies out the window. Cool breeze comes in, you're like, I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, it's funny because that kind of describes me, but I'm a Cancer sun, so it's like I have this whole different weird Cancer thing going on.
Right? Oh, so you're a Libra rising, right?
Yeah, Libra rising.
I thought you were a Libra sun because I mixed all that up.
Yeah,
Because
no,
you
Sharon's
told
a
me
Libra
before,
sun.
but I mixed it
Well,
all up.
Sharon's a Libra sun, so it's easy to confuse that because we were
She's a
talking.
Libra sun and a Leo rising, and then you're a Libra rising and you're a Cancer sun. Now I remember it, but
Yep.
I over time I mix these things up if I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, I hear you. Trust me, would forget my own rising sign all the time. And then finally, because Sharon's a Libra, I remembered. I'm like, yeah, I remember now.
Now I remember.
Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. Yeah, no, so speaking of the Bible, I'm sure you've read the Book of Thomas or pieces of it, or have you checked that out? It's not in the Bible, but it's one of
Right. It's one of
the Coptic or whatever.
what is that called? They found it in Ethiopia, like in a jar buried under a
Oh yeah,
floor of a
yeah.
church.
I can't
It's
believe I can't think of the name of it right now. It's so funny. Nakamati.
Yes, there you go. Nagamati
Nakamati. The
texts.
Nakamati
I
texts.
once bought a book on that by and I don't know, translated and with an introduction by the academic Elaine Pagels. And I didn't even get through the introduction. I don't know why I put it down. I was just like, I am not in the mood to read this. It was too serious. It was too heavy. I was like, I can't deal with this right now. And which is weird because I used to read a lot of serious and heavy stuff and get really interested and dig in. And for some reason that it was just, I don't know, the timing or something. I'm just like, I can't do this right now. And I never got around to reading it. But I've heard a lot of talk about those. A lot of it's exaggerated and a lot of it's crap. A lot of the stuff you hear about the stuff out there on that stuff. A lot of these topics that are really kind of going to be charged in a certain way and have the potential to be divisive. You're going to see things split into various camps and where they get really
Oh
extreme and
yeah.
everybody over there is telling all lies and I'm the only one who's telling the truth about this, and it's just, oh, it's such a mess. I'm just like, I don't even want to deal with this.
Yeah, no, I hear you. The thing I like about it though is from what I've seen, it reads a lot more like Eastern stuff, like the Tao or like stuff like that. It just reads, there's just verses that are just like sayings that are read out, and it's really cool. And that I watched this there's a Harvard class that you can watch on YouTube, and it's a theology class, and there's there's all different classes. There's one on each book of the Bible. I mean, each book of the New Testament. And then they do one on the Gospel of Thomas, or maybe they just cover the Gospels. I can't remember. But anyway, he lectures for about an hour on each one. And it's so funny listening him talk about the book of Thomas, because it's just this like theology professional professor at Yale that's supposed to know everything. And he's totally missing or just pretending to miss the esoteric message in each one. Like he says these things and he's like, well, that doesn't even make sense. Like, it's so
Yeah,
funny. You could just watch
I've seen
him
that
like this.
type of thing before. They will talk, there are certain levels they will talk on and other layers that they just will not touch at all. Not with a 150-foot pole. They're just not gonna go there.
Like
And
they'll say
I
things like,
actually don't think that well, I think sometimes they are. I think sometimes they're totally unaware, but I think a lot of them are not totally unaware of that information that exists out there. But it's just like if they were to bring it into their lecture or into their writings, It's just, you know how academia is so conformist and
Oh
so
yeah.
there's so much things that are taboo that will get you sidelined, and they've got their career and their reputation on the line, and they kind of have to stay within certain boundaries, I guess. I don't know. I
That's a great point. Yeah.
But I do think then also you have some other ones who, because of that, they get really comfortable just staying in the boundaries, and they're not even aware there's anything going on outside of the boundaries that they're operating in. Um, but it's difficult territory, because when you go outside of those boundaries, it's like the Wild West out there, and there's no guide to tell you which is trustworthy and which is not. You have to use your own discernment, and some people are just so uncomfortable doing that they just don't even want to go there at all. So sometimes they got some personal issues with that stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know, it
exactly.
might sound familiar to some people who've been seeing what's been going on in society for the last 2 years.
Yeah, right.
But interesting what you said, that Thomas, I think I remember hearing about that there's like collection of sayings. They're not so much a narrative story. It's just like, here's a collection of sayings and they follow one after another. Because one of the gospels is also similar to that in structure. That in the other ones, it has the least amount of like plot and story and the most just sayings. And I forget which one. Is it Luke? I don't remember off the top of my head. I think it might be Luke.
I'm not sure. I
But
can't remember.
we need somebody more properly educated on this topic to step in with us. I think I just took us into somewhere where we don't know the answer. I don't know. I think it might be Luke. One of them, I've heard that though.
Yeah, I could see that. I really related to that book. I thought it was really interesting, but I would like to dive back into the Gospels again and look at, especially John, because
Yeah,
it's been a while since I've read it. I think it'd be pretty interesting.
yeah, definitely. I read
Reading.
Mark in like 2.5 days. And I don't even remember how much time I spent. Not a huge amount of time though, either, each day. So you can actually get through pretty quick. And I want to reread all of them again, because it's actually been a really long time since I've read them. And it's been a long time since I actually owned a physical copy of the Bible. I got some digital versions of this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, wow, it's been years. I just don't have a physical copy anymore. And I recently got one, and I've actually been doing that a lot more, buying a lot more physical books. And I'll go to the coffee shop and I'll just sit down. Actually, there's one that I think we need to discuss at some point. Um, Lame Deer, Seeker of Visions, John Fire Lamb Deer. And this is he was Lakota native, and
Oh,
he was in the Society of the Heoka, which we had talked about a little bit in the chat on Telegram.
oh yeah, I looked into
And
that. I watched a couple of videos about it.
so he's telling real life stories of his personal life in this society. And so that's one of the books I got. And then I got this is for a course that I'm going to be taking soon, forecasting with astrology, which is not an area of astrology that I particularly like, but I'm trying to make sure my education in astrology is well rounded. So I'm hitting all the basic areas that astrologers talk about and that they're supposed to know about, even though this one is one of my least favorite, because I think predicting the future is bullshit. And I don't know if that's really what it's all about or what's going on. That's what my impression is, that what it's about. So I'm like, I don't know, that's bullshit. I like I'm more into like the personal side of things. How does it, do you find any meaning or coincidences or synchronicities that you can find personal meaning with, or that has some kind of value for you? And it doesn't even matter if it's real. Does it mean something to you? Did you get a cool story out of it? Did you get to reevaluate some things that happened in your life and get some interesting insights about that? That's more what I'm into. But I am going to do this course because I want, like I said, just having a well-rounded education in the field is another one of my goals, But if it is about predicting the future, then I'm like, I'm still going to learn it, but just for the record, I think it's bullshit.
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, I think the
Nobody can predict the
synchronicities,
future.
the
And, and
yeah, yeah.
and hey, don't get me wrong. I love looking up at the sky clock. It's awesome. Everybody should do it, but I don't think you're going to predict the future looking at the sky clock. I think it's bullshit.
Yeah, I think maybe you might be able to like guess at what kind of trends might happen or something like that. But as far as like predicting,
That's the way I see it. Yes, you're going to see, trends, expression of energy coming through. But if we're talking about really actually predicting things, like I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Does Jupiter care if I win the lottery? I don't think Jupiter gives a shit if I maybe maybe Jupiter cares about some broader trends in society, some bigger picture things. We're talking about gods here, like what are supposed to be the gods. But do they care if me individually, Davin, that I win the lottery? I don't think he gives a shit if I win the lottery.
Well, Karibe's chiming in. She said Mark is the shortest of the gospels. And then she said, looking at the Bible in a whole different light, agree there's no prediction of the future. Ancient writings are about describing the cycles.
No, we were talking about astrology
of
predicting the
things.
future.
Yeah. Well, she's saying that ancient writings or whatever about describing cycles of how things are in this realm.
Oh, my bad. So she's
Oh,
just
she put a comma. I read that wrong. So she said looking at the Bible in a whole different light. And then she said, agree, there's no prediction of the future. Ancient writings are about this. Well, maybe, I don't know anyway, but yeah, she gets it.
yeah. Still a valid point. I didn't mean to jump on that one. I just
Oh, no, you're good.
just to be clear, when I was talking about predicting the future, I wasn't talking about the Bible at that point. I was talking about this astrology course that I'm going to be taking. But I also appreciate the point that she made.
Yeah, it sounds interesting though.
Yeah.
I want to check out that lame deer book. That's really cool. I like that. I'm very interested in all that stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to we're going to discuss this at some point because I see it as an interesting thing for us to talk about because you have a background in comedy. And I absolutely love comedy. And we're talking about like a trickster society where there was this,
You did some
trickster.
comedy earlier, my
I
friend.
mean,
How dare you?
there's even, a whole lot more going on than just that, but there is that side of it, as well.
Oh yeah.
So like
Yeah,
this
for
divine
sure.
trickster, the divine, the sacred clown, this type of thing. But also an interesting thing that I'd like to get into at some point with you is this really interesting thing. I see it in the modern world and I see it in the ancient world, like in this Heoka society where there's a so on the one side it's a trickster and a clown and it's making people laugh and it's doing things that are disruptive and unexpected and shaking things up, but they also have a connection with deep sorrow. And I've heard a bunch of comedians like who was it? Some minor comedians that if I could remember and say the names, everybody knows who we're talking about. They'd be like, yeah, that guy. And I've heard a number of comedians that are really well known of the modern era that have said, yeah, something that you learn about, because they travel on the road with other comedians all the time. And they're talking about not just the world of comedy and their personal life, they're talking about meeting with other comedians and engaging with them. And they're like, something that I've noticed is that all of them have a deep connection with like sorrow. That, you can't have this high comedy without also a deep connection with the sorrow. It's like yin and yang. And so a lot of times people who are really funny and hilarious, they actually have a natural connection with the sorrowful side of life as well. And this is something that comes through really strong in when I first was reading about this. I haven't read this book yet, but I've read other things about this topic. And I found that really fascinating. And I've heard you express similar things, not quite in those words, but as well. And I just found that really interesting with your background in comedy,
Yeah, the modern day Hayoka, or however you say it.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think I've come across, I don't know if it's specifically the Hayoka, but there's a podcaster that I used to listen to that did history podcasts. It was called History on Fire. And his mom they're from Italy, but his mom was like a lawyer or something that helped one of these Lakota guys get out of jail in like the 60s or 70s. So he was like in deep with all of them, and he talked about different aspects of society. And I remember him talking about how there was a person who was in the tribe that was like dressed funny. They would dress different. They would always be like counter, whatever it was. They would like
Yeah.
just be silly. They'd always repeat the different, like if there's one narrative going on, they just take the other side of it or whatever. They were just always constantly doing that. And I felt like super inspired by that. I was like, that's like a comedian kind of, like,
Yeah. And
yeah.
also what they were doing was also like social criticism and social commentary.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that they did was when they would reverse what other people would say, it would force people to objectively look at what they were saying and maybe look at, is there something illogical about it? Or is there something distorted about what the other narrative said? It would cause you to reflect back at yourself or society to reflect back on themselves. And also they were kind of the, like, if there was like the chief, they were the only ones who could criticize what the chief had said or what the chief was doing. And so things that needed to be expressed, it could come through from them. And then, they could bring change in that way as well. But they would
Yeah.
do things like they would ride in on their horses, sitting on the horse backwards, and their clothes were on backwards. And they had bows and arrows, but all of them were bent. So there's no way that arrow is going to fly properly. So everything's like distorted and weird, but they also had a connection with like the thunder and the lightning and the gods of the sky. And they were actually also feared and respected. Um, the, Other stories we could tell, but anyhow, there's also like a level of respect for what they represented as well. But doing all kinds of silly things, like if it was really hot outside and people were complaining how hot it was, they would put on like extra clothing and coats and be like shivering and like, oh, it's so fucking cold. And like just they would do everything opposite just to disrupt and distort things and make people like reevaluate what they're looking at. If people were at a funeral and everybody's crying, and they would be making jokes and laughing. And then at a party that was gathered, there'd be like a joyous holiday celebration or whatever, at a big feast, and everybody's happy, and they would sit in the corner crying. And it said to do everything opposite. um
That's
it
so
was the
grounding.
counterbalance to everything.
Yeah, it's so grounding. That's amazing. And the best part I remember is they said they usually would just leave them alone. And you think about the people in our society like that, they're putting on this pedestal, they're given all this money and fame,
Yeah.
so they go along with the narrative or whatever. Yeah, but in that society, they just left them alone, and they could criticize the chief, and then they would just walk away and probably go walk in the woods. I bet is what they did most of the time. Wow, yeah, that's amazing. I'm like a modern day Hoyoka.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, well, we've been going for about 2.5 hours, so
Wow.
probably, unless you have anything else that you want to that you didn't include that you want to talk about, we could probably
I think
wrap this
there's
up
plenty
soon.
more, but we should save it for another conversation.
Oh
uh,
yeah, definitely.
2.5 hour, going past 2.5 hours is going to be way too long.
Yeah,
I think
that's
that's the time
ludicrous.
when you got to break things off and be like, all right, there'll be other opportunities to have other conversations.
Yeah, totally. I like the little community that's kind of forming around us. It's really nice to people who are checking the show out. And
Oh man, it's been amazing. I've gotten the warmest welcomes from people ever since I came on with you and Sheridan that first time. Out of any of the places where I've sat down to do one of these type of things with people, that was where I got the biggest welcome, like the most like open arms type of reception. Just like, hey, so happy to see you here. Like I just such excellent positive vibes coming through.
Yeah, it's great. And even though I don't have a giant, we don't have giant audiences, the quality of like one of our listeners is worth like 10,000 fucking regular, you know what I'm saying? Like it's great. I was just listening little callback when I said I was listening to Lord of the Rings. Or did I say that in this show? Maybe I said that on the phone. But anyway, I'm listening to the Lord of the Rings audiobook again, and there was a part where when they decide to march on Mordor to get Sauron's attention away so Frodo can go destroy the ring. Spoiler alert. But so they ride out and they're like, we don't have that many people, but Gandalf's like, there's men among us that are worth the names of thousands of men. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about our fans. And then Caribe Roots says, always so much fun to learn with Davin. Yes, come back. Thank you, Caribe. Thank you for hanging out. And Robo Honky says, I've learned so much. Thank you both. Thank you for hanging out.
Yeah.
And I guess we could talk about where could people find you. I put the link in the description, but
Yeah. So YouTube, BitChute, and Odyssey. And one of these days, we got to figure this out. How do we get people off YouTube and to go over to Odyssey, where they actually respect things like, oh, I don't know, free speech? Like,
I have a plan because I think YouTube is probably just going to take care of that on its own. So my plan is to upload my stuff to multiple sites like you're doing, but I found there's a service that does
but
it.
there's
I
no
don't know.
growth anywhere except YouTube. And so
Yeah.
I'm just looking at it, watching it happen, and I'm like, how and why? Like, but anyhow, so I'm on
I think
YouTube.
maybe the move is to put clips on YouTube and then put your full content somewhere else. Like you start.
Oh yeah,
Show the
yeah, yeah.
first,
You're right. I've seen people do that, and that does work. But you shouldn't have to work so hard to convince people, especially people who are already aware of these things, to go somewhere where they actually respect free speech and get off of damn
Well,
YouTube.
the
You
thing
know,
is though,
like,
YouTube is so easy. Like people watch it on their TVs and stuff. Like a lot of people that
yeah.
watch this, and I'm not saying I'm just playing. I'm just the Hyoka here. It's so easy on my YouTube. I gotta click on an Odyssey. What the hell's an Odyssey? Like
And
there's no
then
Odyssey app. I can't watch
also
Odyssey on my TV. Sorry.
Telegram, and I
Yeah,
got
Telegram's great.
website. I got my own website as well, and I need to update that. I mean, it's up and going though. It's been up and going for a while. So I got the website. I'll give you the links. Put the links in the description. Yeah, YouTube, BitChute, Odyssey, Telegram, and my own website.
And it's Nivad. Tell them Nivad.
If we're talking about my website, I actually don't remember off the top of my head what you're supposed to type into the browser. But it's my first name backwards, Nivad, Nivad 17 17. So my name's Davin, my name backwards, Nivad17 Astrology on YouTube. I think on BitChute it's just Nivad75, because I keep trying to change it and like it doesn't work or something. So I don't know. It's weird.
That's fine. I put the links below too. If they
Yeah.
really want to find you, they will, or just keep watching this. He'll be back. But we did a conversation on his channel too, so go check that out.
Oh, and that reminds me, I want to get the recording from you from yes, there's that one. So in the Story is Everything playlist, that was then we had a conversation where you came over to my channel, and then the last time that I was on the Oversharing, because we were discussing Chiron, I wanted to put that in my Chiron playlist.
Oh yeah,
I got to
I'll
get
send
the
you.
recording
Yeah,
from you.
I'll send it to you on Telegram.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, you could find me at morelawsmoreproblems.com, and feel free to put this up on your channel too if you want. The more people that see it, the better. So if you're watching this on Davin's channel, go to my website, morelawsmoreproblems.com. It's almost 10 years old. It's coming up really close. Like I think December of 2012 or January 2013 is when I first started it. So go check that out. I have a blog on there I've been doing for 10 years. Not many articles, maybe like 2 a year. And then also all my shows, the Oversharing show you could find there, which is a great show I do with my friend Sharon. We had Davin on twice already, so go check that out. And yeah, everything's right there. We're also on all kinds of podcasts. So just look up Oversharing anywhere you want to get overshared to. And yeah, I think that's it. So thank you guys so much. Thank you guys in the chat for hanging out. And Davin, obviously, thank you so much. I can't find the end button. Here it is. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And right. Thank you for having me back for another sit down conversation. I love it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. Have a good night. All right. That was awesome.